Agenda tonight, we have the public hearing for the 2018-2019 school budget. We have public input, the approval of the minutes from January 8th, 2018. We have new business, which will include a trip request for approval for the Medfield High School Model United Nations. We have one item since posting on January 24th. For old business, we have the 2018-2019 calendar update. We have the student activity policy, which will be the second reading. We have a number of donations. Additionally, we have the superintendent's report to the committee, which will include an update on the director of student services and district recognition. Future agenda items will include the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey presentation by Susan Powell, the high school handbook revisions, and the new grant procedure handbook. At this time, we're going to do public input for anything not related to the budget. We're going to do the budget hearing. We'll do that budget presentation, and at the end of the budget presentation, we'll accept questions, and we'll have the discussion at the end of that hearing. So if there's any public input for something not related to the budget hearing, this would be a good time. And if you just, when you do have a question or input or anything now for public input or at the end of the budget presentation, if you could just state your name and your address would be great.
Hello, my name is Claire Shields. I'm one of the co-presidents of the Medfield Coalition for Public Education, or MCP. I have 3 kids in the public schools here, one in 7th, one in 5th, one in 2nd. I just want to publicly thank Middlesex Savings Bank for its incredibly generous charitable donation of $50,000 to MCP as part of a larger $1.2 million donation to educational foundations in 24 branch towns across the state. I also want to thank the superintendent, the principals, the teachers, and the school committee for their continued commitment to improve and enhance the educational experience of the students in Medfield. As a parent, I am so grateful for their unwavering support. There are amazing things going on in our schools, and we on MCP are lucky to witness firsthand when we receive grants from these dedicated, passionate teachers. Just last month, we funded a $10,000 grant from 5th grade teachers at Dale Street for a classroom set of Google Expedition virtual reality headsets to be shared across the school. This will add a new dimension to the learning experience. For example, when they're studying the ancient Mayans, students will be able to actually go see the temples in Mesoamerica with the headsets. The Coalition's mission is to fund innovative educational grants like that one across all 5 public schools in our district. Last year, we funded $157,000 in grants, and this year, so far, we've funded over $45,000. We're constantly in awe of when we hear about what's going on in our classrooms and love to see the new ideas coming from teachers to enrich what is already pretty great. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Erin Watson. I'm a 3rd grade teacher in Medfield. I teach at the Ralph Wheelock School. And I forgot my notes, so I have to use my computer. As I said, I teach 3rd grade at the Ralph Wheelock School. I've been here for 22 years in Medfield. I'm an active member of the Medfield school staff. I've been on site councils, principal search committees, superintendent advisory councils. I've chaired Wheelock School's student support team for over 10 years. I'm currently the grade level leader of my 3rd grade team. I'm on the faculty advisory committee, the social emotional learning task force. I'm the vice president of the Medfield Teachers Association. So as you can see, I'm heavily involved in the Medfield schools. I've worked for 5 principals and 3 superintendents. I have 2 master's degrees in education. I work really hard to be the best teacher and colleague that I can be. As many of my principals can tell you, I'm very outspoken and I stand up for what I believe in. To be clear, I am here tonight to speak on behalf of not only myself, but other teachers who are concerned about recent negative public publicity on social media. There are many mixed messages in town right now. There are parents voicing concerns about class size and treatment of teachers, and I just want to be clear about a couple of things. I work with amazing people, smart, flexible problem solvers who advocate for themselves and for their students. When our class sizes are higher than normal, we maintain a level of professionalism and excellence. We speak to our administrators and we make plans to meet the needs of all learners because that is what we do. Some parents are claiming that Medfield teachers are leaving at an alarming rate, and I disagree. My grade 3 team has been together for more than 12 years. Teaching is hard, and quite honestly, it's getting more challenging each year. We're teachers, advisors, nurses, coaches, and cheerleaders each and every day, and we have a lot to teach. Time is our greatest enemy, not our administration. If we have issues, we speak to one another and to our administrators. We don't ask parents to advocate for us. If you're concerned about the size of your child's class, we do welcome you to share your concerns about your child in the public forum. But we can and we have spoken up on our own behalf. Recently, many of you received an email about how teachers are being bullied. And as someone who's worked here for over 20 years and is a member of the Teachers Association, I want you to know how disheartened I am about that message, and I believe it is untrue. As teachers, we so appreciate the support of Medfield's parents and this amazing community, but we're concerned about inaccurate information that's being shared via social media. Please don't allow yourselves to be influenced by a constant barrage of emails and social media posts, some of which is inaccurate. We ask that you continue to support the work that we do every day with your children, and be aware that as we teach our students, not everything that you read is true. I thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that has any public input before we open up the public hearing for the budget? Okay, so at this point, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing for the fiscal year 2018-2019 school budget.
So moved.
Second? Aye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everyone to our 2019 fiscal year public hearing. I'm going to do a presentation for you this evening, go over some of the highlights of our budget and some of the process we take to develop a budget, and then we'll take questions at the end. And I'm going to see if I can do this correctly. If you got a chance to see the slides that were playing in the beginning of the meeting or while you were waiting inside, between every school committee meeting, we take everything that's on #MedfieldPS on Twitter, and we put that on a presentation for you to see. So even if you don't have Twitter, you can just Google #MedfieldPS, and you can see all the great things happening in our district. Really proud of what our teachers do and what our students do every day, so get a chance to take a look at it if you're not on Twitter. Just Google every few days. It's really a lot of good stuff going on. So our public hearing, really on behalf of our students, administrators, teachers, and staff of the Medfield Public Schools. So just to give you a little background information on the budget and where we get to, where we are right now with the public hearing. The superintendent is considered the budget officer. The three general areas of responsibility for the superintendent as a budget officer are the budget preparation, presentation, and administration. Tonight's budget is also called the superintendent's recommended budget. So there's no real budget in terms of the school district until the school committee votes to accept a budget. And that's hopefully at the end of this evening they'll do. And then this budget that we're doing this evening is what gets sent to the town. By town charter, we need to submit our budget by January 30th. So once we typically have our public hearing, it's voted on, we submit that to the town the next day. Just some important terms as we go through, especially if you haven't been to one of these budget hearings before. These are the terms that will come up again and again. Chapter 70 is an important one. That's the money that the state earmarks each year for education. And you'll see as we go through the slides that Medfield gets a little over $6 million typically in Chapter 70 funds. Circuit breaker is something that the state puts together to reimburse us for special education costs. Each year they set a threshold, and that threshold changes. It's typically around $40,000. So anytime the district spends over $40,000 a year on a particular student in special education, we're eligible for reimbursement. Typically that is around 70 to 75% reimbursement of the total cost. And every district in the state last year budgeted for 75%, and then we got a letter mid-July, after the fiscal year had started, saying that we're only going to reimburse for 65%, which was a 10% hit for Medfield, which cost us about $84,000. You can imagine the larger districts in the cities, a few hundred thousand that was lost during that. The school committee and I have sent letters to our legislators and asking them for a supplemental budget. There's a supplemental budget that's being talked about at Beacon Hill right now that will restore that 10%. So that's where we are. Still waiting for that for FY18, our current year. Collective bargaining agreements, sometimes called CBAs, and that's the contracts that we have with teachers, separate one with custodians, separate one with secretaries, and also with cafeteria workers. Steps, lanes, and percent increase. That's the pay structure in the collective bargaining agreement. So a step is a yearly increase on a salary grid. So each year, teachers up to a certain amount of years will get an increase based on that. Lanes is a horizontal move on that grid, and that's based on any degrees or any credit attainment during that time. And then the percent increase is a cost of living increase that's added onto the base of a teacher's salary. You'll also see FTEs throughout the presentation. That's a full-time equivalent. So that's a full-time employee or a fraction of a full-time employee. Net school spending, I'll get into that a little bit in a few slides, but net school spending is the required amount that every city or town is supposed to spend on education. And when all of this, the formula for Chapter 70 began many, many years ago, the goal was to get everyone at net school spending. And you'll see in one of the slides I show you that almost everyone, 92% of districts, spend above net school spending already. Per pupil expenditure, total amount spent per student by a school district in a town. This is calculated by the Department of Education. It's the end of the year report that the town and the school district does together. That document is used to calculate that. So that is the really only way you could compare apples to apples in districts and what they spend. There's so many other variables that go into spending. The state had to establish something, and this is what they do, the per pupil expenditure. A level service budget, you'll sometimes hear that in a budget presentation. Essentially, same people, same programs. There's always an increase based on that, but that's what that is, same people, same programs. Capital budget, although there won't be much information on that tonight because the capital committee hasn't had their first meeting yet. Those are typically our big ticket items, things that last 5 to 10 years, are capital items. And like for instance, a couple of years ago, one of the capital items we had was our van, the Warrior van, which we use for transportation of high school students, elementary students, et cetera. But we own that. That saves us a lot of money. It was about $45,000 at the time. But if we had to go out to the bus company and on all those trips, we'd spend a lot more than that just in 1 year. So that gives you a sense of what some of the terms are that we'll be going over tonight in the presentation. And my clicker is not working here. Okay. So just our schedule for tonight in the presentation, look at our mission statement, what things that are new in the district in the last couple of years, the process that we use and assumptions we use building this budget, the priorities that are identified in our strategic plan, budget drivers, funding sources, some benchmarking data with other districts and other towns. Some of the benchmarking we use are really the 20 wealthiest communities in the state, of which Medfield is one. FY19 summary and breakdown, which shows you what we do in each area of the budget and break down that in terms of percentages, increase breakdown, and then going forward in the budget process. It's very, very fluid at this point. So our mission statement, this drives the work of the organization every day. Medfield Public School System will create a dynamic and collegial learning environment. Curriculum and instruction will guide students to achieve high standards and to meet the challenge of change. Through school, family, and community partnerships, students will be prepared to become responsible, sensitive, contributing citizens, and lifelong learners. And, we always try to get a new picture of graduation each year to put in this presentation because that's the end game in all this. That's our mission. Our mission is to get our kids to that point, and you'll see that that's a great picture from last year on our brand new turf. So things that we've done in the last couple of years that are new for the district. One of the big things that we did was completed our strategic plan, Medfield 2021, and I'm sure some of you were a part of that process, either attending a focus group. We had 9 focus groups during that process, and then we had a survey that went out to all community members and parents, and we had about 800 respondents, so that was a really, really good response rate. Expanded our elementary school day for students to 6.5 hours. That created longer specialist time for our students and additional before-school recess. Granted, that additional before-school recess looks different for different kids depending on what bus you're on. Some of that's 5 minutes, some of it's 10 minutes, some of it's 15 minutes. But it's a way for kids to get out and be active prior to the school day. We moved from a 3-tier bus to a 2-tier bus. I'm sure there are people out there that remember if they had a child, maybe at Memorial or Dale Street, putting their kids on the bus and then having to go back out there 40 or 45 minutes later to put their Wheelock student on there. It took a couple of years for us to work through this. We were able to implement that last year, and it's been going fairly well. You know, one of the byproducts of that, which really never came into the conversation when we were planning for it, is the amount it's decreased traffic in town. I know the police and the DPW have told me it's made a world of difference with not having that third bus run. We've added Chromebooks for all of our 11th grade students, and we had 12th grade students before, so that's a one-to-one initiative in which we provide the Chromebooks for our kids. Expanded our Chromebooks to all levels, so if you go in any elementary school right now, or even the middle school, which is an iPad environment, there's Chromebooks there as well our students are using. Implemented the RISE program for students in grades 9 through 12, and that is a transition program for our kids. So any child that has any hospitalization for any reason, they'll come back into the RISE program, and that transition may last 3 days, it may last 3 weeks, it may last 3 months. As long as the child needs that transition time, it's been very successful, and feedback from students and parents has been very, very positive. We also hired a director of social emotional learning, Dr. Dave Wordley, who actually works in the RISE program and oversees that. We created an SEL task force of parents, teachers, and students. We've had a few meetings right now and really focused on how we can improve life for both kids and teachers, and that's been very, very positive. Hired a town and school facilities director. One of the things that we work together and collaborate with the town is that, you know, the town has a lot of new buildings and wanted to make sure that they could maintain those buildings and have someone oversee them. So we certainly had that need as well, and it's worked out very, very well. The one thing is when you have someone that has the capacity and the skill set that Jerry has, he went through and did an entire feasibility study of every building in the town, both school and town-owned buildings. So be careful what you wish for. The binder's this thick, and it's $42 million worth of repairs to buildings. So that's certainly something that's going to be in the future of our town to look at. Partnered with Beginning Years for an on-site staff daycare at the high school. So we took it's a nice collaboration with a successful business in town, and we started to see many of our younger teachers going out on maternity leave, so it made sense for us to do something like this. So this has been full all year. Our first year we didn't have full capacity. We're at full capacity this year, and it's been a great benefit for our teachers and staff. We partnered with the Medfield Police Department to create an SRO, a school resource officer. That was something that the Governor Deval Patrick had really wanted every school district to have. We didn't have one. We had a DARE officer many, many years ago, but not a full school resource officer. Shelley Magnello is stationed at the high school, but works in all 5 buildings, and we're happy to have her on staff. Restructured our special education administrative support. So one of the things that we looked at after doing a program review is that we had structures in place that really weren't successful for our teachers. Our teachers were having to do too much paperwork and too many meetings and not working with kids. So we restructured that time, so now we have team chairs that run those meetings and do a lot of the work and take away from the teachers. I had a meeting with those folks last week, and they said the feedback has been really, really positive. Teachers can actually spend more time with kids instead of doing paperwork and scheduling meetings. We collaborated with school groups for Medfield Talk speaker series. I'm sure most of you have been to at least one of those. Completed our new turf field and track project, and that was under budget and on time. Completed a new boiler project for Wheelock, again, on time and under budget, and then recently just accepted into the Mass School Building Authority program for building a new Dale Street school, which we hope will be on budget and on time. We hope. So the process to date, FY19, again, we start this process typically in October and work through to this point in January, and then it really starts to ramp up from January up to town meeting. So our leadership team met and we established priorities for the schools and district using especially our strategic plan to guide that. Principals and content specialists develop their budget. If you don't know what a content specialist is, it's a department head in the rest of the world. Superintendent and Director of Finance met with principals and content specialists to review requests. So this is something that we started 3 or 4 years ago, having individual meetings with every principal and every department head to go through the process. I think we had 19 or 21 meetings this year, but just really going through and having folks justify and tell us what they need. You know, I think it's the teachers tell their department heads and their principals, and then they come and relay it to us, and then we build a budget based on what they need. It's really looking at a zero-based budget. We're not just saying add 5%, add 0%, add whatever. No, just tell us what you need, and we start from that process. We start the process that way. We found it very, very successful the last 4 or 5 years. The Board of Selectmen and Warrant Committee held a meeting for all department heads, and they want to communicate their FY19 expectations. The superintendent and leadership team, we met to review budget and request an input, and that's when we have that conversation, okay, what's going to make it into that initial budget? What's going to get into that initial budget and get to the point where it becomes a superintendent's recommended budget? Superintendent and Director of Finance met to develop the FY19 initial, and then we presented the FY19 initial to the school committee and made changes based on input. And we had our first meeting with the warrant committee in which they talked to us about, what are you thinking in terms of your budget? What numbers are you thinking? Certainly the 6.75 that was part of the initial isn't fitting into their whole budget picture, so we'll have to work on that as well. But that's where we are at this point, fairly traditional and common, but there's a lot of extra steps in there that we feel make a great budget presentation and a great budget. Some of the assumptions that we did going into this process, federal entitlement grants will be reduced. So this year is the first time that's happened, and I've been a superintendent 12 years, in a long time. So, we don't have to look any farther than the news and see what's going on in Washington, and not sure that education is on anyone's agenda down there, quite frankly. So we're not looking at any increases in the federal entitlement grants. The big one that we have, the 94-142, is our special education. That allocation is usually around $528,000, so it's a big chunk of money, and that pays for a lot of our special education staff. Title I is only in a couple of buildings, but that supports students in mathematics and reading. And Title IIA is money that we use for professional development with teachers. So again, but we've seen those numbers dwindle, and we're not expecting those to go up for FY19. We're expecting Chapter 70 to be level funded. Again, Chapter 70 is the money earmarked from the state for education. It goes directly to the town. It does not come to the school district, but it is earmarked for education. Governor Baker's presentation last week, it looks like it's about $20 per student extra that we're getting. Typically in a low year, we'll get 25. Good years, we'll get 50 to 75. I was told by folks that it looks like there's going to be an increase in the legislature. So by the time, it will be well after town meeting, but by the time the budget is set at the state level, we should have additional money for Chapter 70, up above and beyond what Governor Baker put in his first round of budgets. Enrollment will increase. We've seen enrollment increase primarily in the elementary years, and you'll see that's some of the additional positions we've added in the budget. Continuation of our tuition-based program, so that's full-day kindergarten and our preschool program. So one thing that we do is Medicaid reimbursement, and that's something that we are able to apply for. Only school districts can do that. And we apply through the Medicaid program for students, for costs for special education students. Then that money goes right to the town. It gets actually wired right to the general fund. So the last 4 years, we've generated over $200,000 of unrestricted revenue to the town. That's always a bone of contention with school districts and towns, because school districts will say, why do we do this? Because we don't see it. Well, of course you see it. You see it eventually. It's part of the town allocation. It's just not explicitly said, okay, this money is going right to you. So we feel that's an important thing to keep doing. And we have a building use revolving account in which we use that money to offset overtime for custodians for when folks are renting the gyms for basketball or whatever on the weekends. And then we've pledged $30,000 a year out of that to pay for the turf field loan, the $1.6 million loan there. So that was part of what we did to offset the cost for that field. And then circuit breaker will be funded at 60%, and again, that's used to offset our special education costs. So looking at the strategy items that come out of Medfield 2021 that have direct financial impacts, if you look at the strategic plan, you'll see there are lots of items in there. Many don't have direct impact in the fiscal 19 budget, so these are the ones that are part of it. Our goal number one is we're committed to a collaborative learning culture and continuous improvement for our staff and students. So we want to maintain and enhance our current staffing, continue the commitment to professional development, and strengthen and expand our STEAM program and looking at science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So that's, a focus that we've been looking at, and certainly we've done that at the elementary and now adding new coursework at the high school as well. Goal number two, we're committed to supporting and developing the health and social emotional well-being of all students and staff. Again, maintaining that current staffing is important for us. Wellness and RISE program are two areas that we're working on with that. And then continue the commitment to professional development. I think that's an important thing. This community has been very supportive of professional development in the past. And as we go through the budget, I'll talk about some of the buckets of professional development money that we have in our budget. Goal number three, that we're committed to developing the whole child, recognizing contributions and needs of all students, and we've increased that special education staffing again. We continue to look at our ELL staffing, our English language learners. That's been creeping up in the last few years. We're above 20 on that now, and that's probably for the first time in many years in Medfield. And then, try to maintain and enhance those opportunities for students outside the classroom. Goal number four, we're committed to contributing to a vibrant community by fostering a collaborative, communicative, and consistent education for all of our students. And this is something we're going to work real hard at, and we continue to do, is the resource allocation among all schools and across all schools. You'll see that in the budget, the allocation. Certainly costs a lot more to run a high school and a middle school than it does elementary, but we try to get that allocation as fair as possible. And then goal number five, committed to continued investments in the facilities and equipment to optimize student learning. So again, we want to maintain that director of facilities position that I spoke of that we share with the town. The resource allocation, the tech infrastructure is huge. We've added a lot of technology infrastructure in the last 5 years in places where we were told it would never work, and it works, places like Dale Street. So I think that's something that's important. We want to continue to upgrade that infrastructure. And then, of course, the Dale Street feasibility study that we're still working on that, but we've submitted a warrant for town meeting for $1.5 million for a feasibility study for Dale Street, and that's on behalf of the school committee and the permanent building committee as well. More information about that will be going out once the warrant is finalized. So some of our budget drivers that we have, and they're not different, than most school districts. Certainly the instructional and personnel costs. I mean, you're going to have any district, you're going to have 80%, give or take, of your budget is going to be salaries, not just instructional salaries, but salaries across the board. So our collective bargaining agreements and our contracts is certainly a budget driver. Transportation, we're entering year 2 of a 3-year contract for FY19, and if you were here last year or have seen any school committee meetings, you know that that transportation is something that is frustrating for us because we only get one bidder in the bid process, and what tends to happen is that one bidder gives us a price and we can't do much about that, and it's very, very frustrating. We had the initial bid was last year, and we spread the cost over 3 years, and we have a big chunk of it coming in year 2 because we deferred it from our first year of the contract. Special education, in-district positions, the out-of-district positions, transportation, program development, all those things are drivers in our budget. Our professional development, as we talked about earlier. Health insurance costs, they don't show up on our side of the ledger, but they certainly impact what the town can allocate to us. So that's an important piece to remember, that being a budget driver, even though it's not in our operating budget. And then our enrollment, so we're looking at increase in teachers at both Memorial and the Wheelock School. So looking at the funding sources, so I think sometimes folks think about just local money and state money, but there's also that other piece that's really important and that we do a pretty good job at here. So if they're looking at FY18, which is our current fiscal year. 3 components of that budget. Chapter 70, the $6 million we talked about earlier. Local contribution, $26 million. That's a lot of money. And that's your tax money directly. That's a local contribution. That's something that many suburban communities are having difficulty with because there's not a lot of industry, and a lot of it is on the back of the taxpayers. And then there's that other piece, which I'll get into in detail in the next slide. That's the grants, tuitions, and fees. So that's over $3 million in FY18, our current year, so that even though our budget was $33 million, it actually cost over $36 to run the district as you see it today. An important piece to remember. Also, you know, Medfield has 2 other districts that it pays to. This year in FY19, we will be paying $166,527 to Tri-County and $56,000 and change to Norfolk County Aggie for a total of $222,000. So those are assessments that the state gives the town of Medfield. We have X amount of students in those schools, and they put it in the formula, give it to it's called the cherry sheet, and give it to the town, and then the town must pay that. So that's just an important piece to remember. It's not just the public schools that the town is paying for, but also those 2 other school districts. So let's take a look at the other funding sources. So that's that $3 million piece. State and federal grants, looking at over $645,000. Tuition, pre-K and K, $700,000. School lunch receipts, so that's, you know, the revolving accounts of money coming in that we use, that we pay our cafeteria staff with and for food, et cetera, $625,000. Athletics, $320,000, that's the athletic fees that parents pay. Undistributed receipts, $410,000, so that's looking at rentals for the building, that's parking fees, all those are part of those receipts. Private grants and gifts, the $180,000, so that's what Claire had talked about earlier, you know, some of the money that we get from MCPE, PTO, anything that you hear at a school committee meeting that we accept a donation to gets put in that private grants and gifts. And then our circuit breaker allocation this year, $479,000. Again, a huge offset to special education cost. And we count on that money, and when it's cut from us, it creates problems. So another important piece is that FTEs, those full-time equivalents, we are right now in FY18 paying for 40.6 FTEs outside of the operating budget. So those folks are not included in that $26 million or that $6 million in state money. These are the folks we're paying, and that's out of the $3.3 million, the other category. Per pupil expenditure, Medfield is at $14,325. State average is at $15,545. So here's something I want you to just think about. If we spent the state average per pupil, our budget would increase to over $38 million, or it would be a 17% increase tonight. So instead of what you're seeing tonight, if we spend just the average and what the state is for per pupil expenditure, we have a 17.1% increase this evening. So I'm going to get into some of the benchmarks and some of those things. I think it's important for folks to know that our numbers and our spending is lower than many of our like and peer communities. So I know this is hard to see, but these are the wealthiest communities in Massachusetts. Boxford, Brookline, Concord, Dover, Lexington, Lincoln, Needham, Newton, Norwell, Sherburne, Southborough, Sudbury, Wayland, Wellesley, Weston, Westwood, Winchester, and Medfield. And I know it's difficult to see, but that data on there tells us what the average household income is. It gives us the distance, which isn't important from here, and it gives us the number of students. So I like to look at, when we're looking at this, Westwood and Wayland are really like communities to us in terms of household income and number of students. So let's take a look at some of the analysis on this. So average out of that group, 18,280 for our per pupil expenditure. And let's look at Medfield, way over to the left, a little over 14. Let's look at it a different way. So here's a list of these communities in a bar graph, and the orange one over here is the state average. Medfield's on the far right, next to Winchester. So if you look at Wayland, Wayland's in the middle, and they have the same amount of kids that we have just about, in household income in Wayland and Medfield are almost the same. But they're spending $17,426 per kid. If you go over some of these other ones, I could hover over some of these and see Weston is the most right now at almost $24,000 per kid. So we're definitely seeing, you know, a disparity between what we're spending compared to others. And when we start talking about things like class size and other things, this is how you get those numbers down, is you spend more money and you hire more teachers. So net school spending is that required amount we talked about earlier in the definitions. So that's the amount required to spend in education, and as I said earlier, 92% of school districts already spend above the net school spending. It was a great idea when it first started, but certainly districts, they were supposed to be the great equalizer on how they were going to have poor districts and wealthier districts be together. But the wealthier districts just figured out we're going to keep spending more anyway. And we're going to do our local contribution, we're going to spend more and spend more and spend more. So on the left-hand side, we have the listing of the towns. That's the percent above net school spending. So the percent they're spending above what they're required to spend in education. On the right-hand side, you look at Chapter 70 as a percent of net school spending. So that means how much money they're getting in Chapter 70. So you would think that, one would think, that Weston would get more Chapter 70 because they're spending so much above net school spending, when in fact the case is they're getting less. They're getting 7% of net school spending is Chapter 70. They're spending more local money. And I just want you to pare down to Medfield and see that we're spending 36.3% over net school spending, and look at our competition and what they're spending. So that all ties back to the per pupil expenditure. So let's get into the budget itself. Let's talk about, I'm going to go through each one of these areas, the summary areas, and then break out student services, district services, and policy and administration. So the budget area is on the far left, and then the actuals for FY17. So we can't have actuals for FY18 because we're in the middle of it right now. And then what the FY19 request is, the change in dollars and the percent change. So student services, we'll see a percent change of 19.6%. District services, 10.3, and policy administration at 2.8. And I'll tell you what those look like in a minute. So the summary for student services. So district-wide staff, 979, office support staff, 76, tutoring, 50, summer school, 35, testing, screening, 4,000. Remember that Medicaid thing we were talking about? There's a filing fee that you have to do each time you do that. Now, just something I'll say, that in other places, you try to get an agreement where that becomes part of the town side because they get all the revenue, but we still carry that on our side, the Medicaid, unfortunately. Contracted services at 20, supplies and equipment at 48, transportation, 340,000. So that's special education transportation outside of what we talked about with our busing contract. And then tuitions, so those are tuitions to outside schools, outside placements, students that we can't service correctly or appropriately in our district, that go to outside placement, 1.2 million. So that's an increase of 19.6% or 2.8 million in that area. Excuse me, it's not an increase, I'm sorry. It's the total. The increase is 19.6%. District services, so that's district-wide staffing, maintenance, salaries, OT, summer help, research and development. So research and development is really important, we think, to what we do each day in the schools. Every summer, teachers are allowed to do a proposal in the spring, and over the summer they do some R&D projects. So it could be enhancing the curriculum, it could be putting together a new course. It could be working together to collaborate on something they just couldn't do during the school year because the school year is so hectic. So that $60,000 we allocate is to pay salaries for the teachers to work in the summertime on their project. And we've seen great things come out of that. Usually our first or second school committee meeting in the start of the year, we'll have teachers come in and present some of the great work they did. Professional development, degree change, and course reimbursement. So teachers have course reimbursement in their contract. Degree change is something where, as teachers move horizontally on the pay scale, we have to plan for that, and then professional development as well. Teacher retirement and sick leave buyback. There are still some teachers here that have a provision because they were grandfathered into the provision where when they retire, they get some of their sick time bought back. And then contracted services, supplies, equipment, custodial expenses. And then there's that regular education transportation. So 1.4 million for transportation on our buses, regular ed transportation on our buses. That's something that I always ask parents, please put your kids on the bus because we're paying an awful lot for it, an awful lot for it. And, you know, many communities can absorb it a little bit differently because they have bus fees. We don't have bus fees in Medfield. So many communities, when that initial bus contract is brought to them, they can offset those costs with bus fees. We just don't do it here. So that's something we've talked about before, and there are many reasons why, but we don't have bus fees in Medfield. So policy administration, that's central office staff, general reserve, which allows us to use those funds for different areas that we need to in a reserve account. Our office support staff, our legal, supplies, equipment, utilities, and rent. So we pay rent to be at town hall. That's the $24,500. Tech and accept memberships. So we belong to collaboratives. Tech Collaborative and Accept Collaborative. And those are both special education collaboratives, and it's important to be a part of those. They save us money, certainly, when our students attend the schools, but also we do cooperative purchasing with Tech, in which we get together with many school districts to purchase supplies and materials, and it saves us a lot of money, so that's an important piece to be a part of that. School committee expense, $20,500. Typically, that's a little bit lower, but we're going to do a project in FY19 to digitize our policy manual and update all of that. So there's some costs associated with that. Our district-wide professional development at $50,000, and then technology, $538,000. So that's level funded. It was a lot higher earlier when we started this process. When that initial budget was done, it's been reduced to a level budget, a level service budget at this point for technology, and then textbooks at $50,000. So looking at the budget summary for our elementary schools, again, following from the left to right, the budget area, the actuals, the FY18 and the FY19, the change in dollars and the change in percentages. You'll see that the allocation in terms of the cost, 3.2 million, 3.7 million, 3.8 million, fairly consistent. You'll see the biggest change at Wheelock, that 10.4%, is because we've added 2 teachers for second grade next year and 1 for third. So that's 3 additional staff, which really brought that up. Again, if your budget in schools, 80% of it is salaries, you know you're going to see a big jump in the percentage if you're adding positions. So that's 3 positions there. And then 1 position at Memorial School, which brings it up. And again, part of that is depending on where teachers are on the salary scale, because so much of that is dependent on our staffing. When we get to the middle school and high school, you'll see how much larger the budgets are. It's just more people working there, more people working in the middle school and in elementary school. There's more teachers working at the high school than in the 3 elementary schools combined. So just give you a sense of how big the high school is and the programming and those kinds of things. It's certainly a bigger building. At Blake, you'll see the increase there is 3.1%, the high school 3.8%, so fairly consistent. But you'll see the request at $6.8 million for Blake, an additional $207,000, and then $9.5 million at the high school, an additional $344,000 there. So our total FY19 at this point, a request is $34,990,587, a change of close to $2 million over FY18, 5.29%. That is down from the 6.75% on the initial budget that we did a few weeks ago. Take a look at the distribution in a pie chart, get a good sense of what the distribution is across the district. If you can't read the numbers, I'll start at the top. Administration, 4.5%, Memorial School, 9%, Wheelock, 10.8%, Dale Street, 10.9%, Blake, 19.5%, High School, 27.2%, District Services, 18%. So looking at a breakdown of the increases as we go forward. Staffing, teachers, steps, lanes, a % increase in longevity is just a hint over $1 million. Paraprofessionals, 249. So those are paraprofessionals that are actually working here this year. And the reason why they're in as an increase for FY19 is that they weren't in the FY18 budget. So we had folks, whether it was move-ins that needed, as part of their plans, needed a one-to-one or needed additional assistance, or to reduce class size in the current first grade, we hired an aide for that. Those were not in the FY18 budget. So that's why they're showing as increases in FY19. All other staff, so we talked about the CBAs, they have steps in percentage increase in theirs as well. So that's 182. The new classroom positions, 63,000. Okay, now if you think about removing 3 positions from the middle school and adding 4, you're at a net 1. That's why you get the 63,698. Special education tuitions, 153 is an increase. New positions at 79, so that's 2.5 special education folks. And then transportation went up as well. Supplies and services up 48, and then transportation, that's that big one again, 147. And just to note that 72.4% of FY19 is called instructional salaries. So there were additional positions that either the department heads or the principals asked for that are not included in this budget, and this is basically how we got down to this, and some level funding of supplies got us down to the 5.9 instead of the 6.75. So a .4 library media person at Memorial was something that we did not include in this round of the budget. That position has been .6 for a while, so we did not add that. It was in the plans to make that full-time, but it's not in the plans at this point. 1.3 reading teacher, and that's over a couple of buildings, not just one. 0.5 math teacher, and that's really a math specialist, and that did not make it in there. A 0.5 nurse, and that was slated for Blake. And then general aid at Dale Street did not make it. So projected class sizes for K to 8, we want to spend a little time on this so you get a sense of that. So a full day kindergarten, you'll see that we have a 21 student cap on that. Half day K is still be determined because we don't know how many folks are going to sign up for half day K, or whether or not we're going to have a lottery or what we're going to do for full day. It's just too early to know that at this point. Grade 1, we're projecting 21, grade 2, 20, grade 3, 22, grade 4, 23, grade 5, 23. Again, we've had 23 as an average in grade 4 this year, and 23 as an average of grade 5 this year. Grade 6, 23, so that current grade 5 is at 23. They're going to grade 6 and still be 23. Grade 7 at 21, grade 8 at 22. And the reason why it goes down in grade 7 and grade 8 is because world language becomes a core subject in grade 7. So it's not something that it's not, in grade 6, it's not a core subject. So that doesn't take some of the class size into consideration. So that's the deal there. But that's based on our projections we have from NESDEC. If you remember, some of you were at the school committee meeting in October. Some of it in the school committee in October, and you saw that we had gotten the NESDEC numbers fairly early. We typically get those in December or January, and we got them earlier this year because we wanted to get a better planning on this. We also know that NESDEC will always say, and they've told us this now for the last few years, is that when you look at 3 communities that have a large percentage of students or children living in their town, and it always happens, so they call it, when folks move out, more families move in. The 3 they've identified that always have that, Hopkinton, Sudbury, and Medfield, the 3 communities. So why the need for this 5.92%? Maintains most of our current staff and programs, increases steps, lanes, and longevity, and increased Unit A. Level funds professional development, that's our R&D, our conference and travel, and our course reimbursement. So those are the 3 buckets of PD. R&D we've spoken about. Conference and travel is for teachers and staff to go to other places and go to workshops. Course reimbursement, that's set by contract, $42,500. Teachers get reimbursed for any courses that they take that are approved. Adds a teacher in grade 1, 2 teachers in grade 2, and 1 teacher in grade 3. Adds 2.5 special education teachers at the elementary level and a 0.5 reading teacher. eliminates 3 middle school positions, and just as a reminder, because we've talked about this before, we eliminated one section of grade 5 in FY18, one section of grade 4 in 17, and so on and so on. So this isn't new. We've been doing this every year, this group. It's a smaller group, and we've eliminated one position each year in that area. Point 4, math teacher reduction at the high school, and that's really just based on courses and availability. Increase the general education, special education transportation, which we've discussed. Include special education support staff, and I mentioned before that 9 aides have been added since town meeting last year. Supports our policy manual revision with MASC, which I had mentioned as the increase in the school committee, and then supports a portion of a part-time prevention specialist. This is something that the police department and Medfield Youth Outreach and we have been talking about for a few years now. I know that Medfield Youth Outreach is going to the personnel board for this, but we wanted to collaborate on a position that we think is important in our town. So that person would run the MCAP program, where the Medfield cares about prevention, and do some prevention work with our students in the community. So we thought that was important. And we're not sure if that's going to make it because it needs to go through the personnel board before, definitely before town meeting, so we'll know before then. So just a few parting words before we take questions. This is really a long process and far from over. We need to remind everybody it's January. Town meeting is in April, and there's lots of work to be done and lots of information that comes to the district between now and then. So some of the key dates for you to keep in mind, warrant committee meeting is on the 26th, so that's when the school committee and I will be meeting with the warrant committee at 7 o'clock at the public safety building. We have school committee meetings on the 12th of February, the 12th of March, and the 2nd of April. As I said earlier, the House budget has not been released yet, so we only have the governor's budget. The House and Senate need to do theirs. Right now, the town is communicating that they do not expect any more than a 4% increase out of our budget. And then it's just, as we illustrated with the 9 positions we had to add since town meeting. I mean, school districts have, we have certain things that happen that we have no choice on. We have to fund. When students need support, we provide that support. And what that support looks like on January 29th might be very different on September 5th. And I think folks need to recognize that our budget, and the school district's budget is very, very fluid. It's not just a set number, and we're always working with that. So, Madam Chair, if you have any questions or would like me to entertain any questions from the audience.
If I could just remind everyone to please go to the microphone, state your name, that would be great.
School committee going for, okay. Jerry Potts, 7 Kerr Street. So I have a couple of specific questions, and then rumor had it that school, the class size was a little bit of an issue, so I have a question on that. Was that true? The first one is, first of all, thank you to Mike LaFrancesca for putting, and Dr. Margin for putting all the numbers up. I've been here 20 years in the school system. I've never seen them all put out like that, so thank you very much. I know it's a lot of work, but it really helps a lot, so thank you. I had one very specific question, which was around district leadership, district services. There's an $80,000 increase from 187 to 268 on media technicians, which is about a 44% increase, and I was just wondering, I understood all the other ones because those were aligned with special education and a lot of the objectives. That one, I wasn't sure what that line item was.
What line number are you on, Jerry?
It's under district leadership, district services, 104. It's media technicians. The requested budget is 268, and last year was 187.
Line 16, right?
Line 16?
Yeah.
Sure. So that, one of the things that we found in sharing staff, which is great in some regard, but not so great in others, is that Owen, our technology director and also network manager, has spent a lot of time working at the police station, DPW, et cetera, and he takes care of the town side as well. So we were fortunate enough to have on our staff someone who was an IT director in the private sector, who was working in a much lower capacity that she certainly can do much more. So we're going to have her, work as IT person assistant under Owen to do some of that work, because we've increased an enormous amount of machines, infrastructure, and we still have the same amount of people doing the IT work. So it made sense for us to do that.
Makes total sense. A question on just incremental cost of a student coming into the district. So I've seen numbers, I've gone to the state hospital meetings, and I know that's one of the questions that they're having depending on growth. So what number does the district use for the incremental cost of someone coming into the district? Not the average, because that's obviously not what one new student would be. So 14,000 is the average.
Per pupil, yeah. Well, I think that depends on what the situation is. I mean, if it's a student that, and I think we've talked about this before, if you have a couple of students into a grade level, it's not a big deal. If you start having lots of students in the grade level, it's a big deal. You need to add teachers and staff, et cetera. But I know and Michael worked with the folks on the hospital committee to get a sense of what that cost would be as you get up to 20 additional kids or whatever, you add teachers.
Right.
And that's how we did that. So we're not working incremental in terms of how we get to that per pupil. We're looking at individually as a kid, how are we going to service that kid, and if there is, services that student may need above and beyond, we have to factor that cost in as well.
Sure, but there was a number provided to the state hospital committee. Do you have that number?
Mike, do you remember what that number was?
So about 3,500? Okay, so where I'm going with this
I don't remember. I thought it was more than that, but
I would think it'd be more than that. It depends a lot on what the services the kid needs. If you're adding one kid to put you over, say, 27 in a classroom, you need to add a classroom, it becomes a much bigger.
Totally understand. So actually, the grade I'm going for is the 6th grade.
I know.
So the incoming 6th grade, that has been the drop a
Right.
teacher each year. So
Right.
my question on the size of the classes is, and I've gone to a few of the school committee meetings, and if I had a kid at Wheelock and Memorial, I'd be up raising my hand to fix that. And I see the budget does that, and I respect that the school committee spent a lot of time on that. My concern is around the 6th grade class. My understanding is that dropping a cluster, the three teachers, means that average class size goes from this year 16 to 18 to 23 to 24 for next year's 6th grade class. And that, I checked that with Nat Vaughn before this meeting, so that eliminating that cluster appears to take what was a class size issue at the Memorial School in Wheelock and make it one at the 6th grade. And so my question is, if we have capacity in the 6th grade level, which we do, and the
capacity for
average
students?
Excuse me?
Capacity for students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, capacity for students. If we didn't remove the 3 teachers, if we kept 3 clusters,
Okay.
we don't have to build anything, we don't have to add more teachers, we have that capacity.
Right.
And if adding there, not in Memorial or Wheelock, averages to be, I think it's somewhere between 3,800 and 4,000 per student, and where I'm going with this is the question of school choice, is that for a 6th grade, a town like Holliston uses that tool of school choice to fill grades to keep class size small. So if I'm a 6th grade parent, I would want to have 16 to 18 students, and I don't care if 4 or 5 of them are from another town, because I'm going to get 5,000 from the state, and I'm only going to pay 3,800 to add that incremental student, versus having 25 kids who are all from Medfield. So my question is just, I know there's been a lot flying around, and I saw Mike Sullivan's response that it was 15,000 a student. That's inaccurate. And I know there's all kinds of discussions to have around it, but if we're under pressure from a budget standpoint, I think thinking creatively to make sure that class size stays even for all of the grades, that we don't penalize the 6th grade because we have an issue at Wheelock and Memorial, I just would ask the school committee to consider that kind of discussion in an open forum. So,
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
If I may, just, from my own perspective as a member, the class size for the current 5th grade is 23, as I understand the data we have. The class size for next year's 6th grade will also be 23. And so it's not the same incremental cost, because now you're taking those 3 teachers, and you're putting them, that this budget eliminates, you're putting them back in. And those teachers, I don't know where they are on the scale, but I know 36 of our teachers next year will make over $100,000. So we can't just budget sort of the average teacher that we would hire, which is a master's degree. Which is, what's that again? I know
64, Michael? 64,000.
64,000. So we wouldn't do that. It's not just the incremental cost. So, as personally as a school committee member, as we start pulling money, Betsy DeVos has written a lot about this, as you know, the Federal Secretary of Education, and spoken a lot about this. You're pulling money, her position is opposite of mine, but you're pulling money from, say, Walpole, Millis, Medway, 5,500. You're damaging that district in order for a very short period to prop up our district and bring in kids that now you've made a commitment to keep through graduation. And I think that, to me, that's a much bigger step to take in order to get a class size adjustment where, from my perspective, 23 kids in a class in 6th grade is pretty consistent with our target.
But if it's 16, 18 now, that's a significant increase in the
But
class size.
that class is going to 7th grade. They'll continue
They'll
to
have
be
21 in their class in 7th grade.
Right, you're comparing the class, I can't do the math, but
The
you're
5th grade
comparing
class
this year's
that's going
6th
in.
graders to this year's 5th graders. This year's 5th graders' experience
Already have
at
23.
Now, that doesn't mean, look, would they have a better experience at 16, 18? I don't know. I personally don't think so. I think our teachers are skilled enough that they handle that class size, especially when you get to middle school. You get to more mature students who are, and my wife teaches middle school. I know using the word mature is a little bit strong for 6th grade. But they are able to sit for longer periods. They're moving around a lot more in school. They're changing classes. So from my perspective, to make such a drastic policy change, and we voted on school choice every year. I've been on this committee for 7 years. We've never thought it made sense for this district, where we all struggle. When I moved here, it was paycheck to make the mortgage, because this is one of the most, along with everything they say about how much we make, it's one of the most expensive places to live in the Commonwealth, too. And so, to get here, to struggle to buy in here, and then to suddenly say, okay, to get a class size from 23 to 18 and sort of open the floodgates to bring in kids, and you don't know what they bring with them in terms of kids with disabilities,
So let me,
kids
but
with
then,
limited language.
there are towns like
proficiency.
Holliston that have done it for 17 years. It's $850,000 of their budget. I'm just saying at a time when we're considering to cut things, at least have a discussion in an open forum. I've been at all the school committee meetings when the topic has come up, and there's never been a discussion. In fact, there's never been public participation on that. It's been the superintendent recommending it and the school committee not opening it up for dialogue and voting with it.
But it's
So I
always-
just would ask to consider it, and I understand there's disagreement on it, and it's a good, healthy disagreement to have. I totally get, but to have it in the open, to have a discussion, I think it could alleviate potentially some of the concerns, and I know there are other topics with it, too.
And I respect that. We have had it in the open. It's always on the agenda. Public forum, when we say it, public forum, we say if there's something on the agenda you'd like to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. And we have had discussions about it, and there are different views on it. This school committee has never endorsed it, never,
I would just
believed it.
suggest it is supposed to be a public, just like this, open to the public. There's supposed to be an announcement. It's not just on the agenda. That isn't a public hearing.
I disagree.
Well,
I disagree with your interpretation of the law as a lawyer, but be that as it may, we've voted it every year. We are not a school choice district today.
So are you saying a public hearing means you put it on an agenda?
I'm not going to debate the
I'd like
legal
to get it for the
matter. I'm
record.
just telling you, we're not a school choice district today, and I'm telling you, we've thought about it. This was not a flip decision. I personally don't support it. I can't speak for other members.
And that's totally legitimate. I just would say for a public hearing, there should be an announcement similar to what we're having tonight, and a good dialogue. So thank you for entertaining it. I appreciate it.
Hi, Renee Howley, Harding Street. Unfortunately, you're probably going to hear a lot of the same stuff, but I have my whole speech written, so I'm going to read it. As a parent of a rising 6th grader and a rising 5th grader, so I want to thank you for having the opportunity to speak. I do want to acknowledge the difficulty of what you're trying to do. We all know our schools are underfunded as compared to surrounding comparable towns. But the reality is we don't have the industry that a town like Westwood does. We are supporting it on the backs of us working parents owning homes, and we don't have the industry for the additional money. I will say honestly, when I was planning on coming here about 2 weeks ago, before last week's meeting happened, my plan was to present a plea to keep STEM and enrichment programs for K through 5 in the budget, which got dropped last year. I was very disappointed to see they're not even in the proposal this year. I didn't imagine I would be here fighting for core education for the children in Medfield. While I understand the need to fund additional teachers in the lower elementary grades, to do so at the expense of our rising 6th and 5th graders is unacceptable. When we moved here in 2014, mainly for the schools, mind you, we certainly don't have a nightlife in Medfield. My oldest was in 2nd grade. At that time, we had about 162 kids in his class. As you stated, we've been removing one teacher ever since, which makes sense at that level. However, we're now at 182. We've added those 20 kids back in. That's about 6 to 7 kids per year, which is the projection for next year, which would yield our rising 6th graders being a class of approximately 187 students. This is 8 less than the current 6th grade class. So how a differential of 8 possibly warrants the removal of 3 students is beyond my imagination. To say the current 6th grade students deserve class sizes of 6 to 18, but our kids deserve class sizes of 23 to 24, it's really incomprehensible to me as a parent. They are entering such a transitional time in their lives. Their little bodies are going through huge changes. Their social interactions start to change and peer pressure increases. The use of social media becomes widespread and the issues that come along with it become much more prevalent. Along with these personal challenges, the demands of their education also gets harder. I implore you to reconsider the proposal to cut 3 teachers at Blake. Our children deserve so much more than that. Our teachers deserve so much better than that. We need to find a better way to solve this financial issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen Carew. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Like Renee, I came prepared tonight, kind of a little bit last minute to speak tonight. A lot of people have touched on many important points, and some of my words may be reiterating some things. It's not necessarily that I am reiterating certain concerns. I am not here to advocate how to make changes, that you should or shouldn't be doing it in a certain way. I simply am looking to present some thoughtful questions, which I'm sure you've already been thinking about. So, I have 2 children in the Medfield schools. I've served on various boards in the community, on various committees as well. And having worked in schools as well for several years as a teacher, as well as an executive in the business world, I understand that budgets, no matter where you work, are very difficult to manage. And it's impossible to fund everything that is needed. So before I begin, I just want to remind everyone that we're all in this room today with a similar goal. We're here to provide the children of Medfield with the best public education that our budget can handle. So first, I'd like to note that in recent years, many decisions have been made in the district to improve the Medfield schools, whether it be from more full-day kindergarten classes all the way up to more STEM classes in the high school and in between. And Dr. Marsden outlined so many of those efforts, and I applaud everybody involved with that. I have felt extremely confident and supportive in the overall direction that our administrators, school committee have been bringing our schools and with how they've worked with the town, specifically with the warrant committee. I would also like to applaud the efforts to return the early elementary class sizes to between 18 and 21 students by replacing the teachers that had been removed years prior. My concern is the consideration to remove the whole cluster of 3 teachers from the middle school in order to accomplish bringing those teachers back to the younger grades. It feels a bit like stealing from Peter to pay Paul. I see one problem with this, which is that the current 4th and 5th grade class sizes have quietly crept up from their small sizes to the current class sizes of 22, 23. As Renee pointed out, the 5th grade and the 4th grade were smaller, and they have crept up. So removing the 3 teachers from the middle school will create even bigger core classes for these students. There's also the obvious question about teacher efficacy and satisfaction. And as Erin Watson so eloquently presented, and has mentioned that surely those concerns are being addressed by the teachers themselves. And I'm sure they can voice for themselves whether working with children age 11, 12, 13, 14 is as agreeable as working with age 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. For a parent and as a committee and superintendent, I ask you to consider, is it efficient for these teachers to go back and learn new benchmarks, new curriculum? I'm not presenting, excuse me. So these are some of the questions that I hope you would expect to be asked before finalizing these line items in the budget. I'm not saying that I'm knowledgeable on the reasons for where we have come to the budget. It's a lot of work, and I acknowledge that. I'm not behind the scenes. I'm not in the school committee. I'm not in the administration. I don't have all the information that you do. But I suspect that this decision to take out the 3 middle school teachers and to put them back at the elementary level is cost-related. My hope is that the school committee, superintendent, warrant committee, and all the decision makers work together and will realize that removing teachers is not necessarily the best decision to improve our Medfield public schools. I don't think I'm alone in stating that teachers have been one of our top assets. The children are learning from our teachers. Our educators should be our #1 priority in our budget, and even more so than what they have already getting. Excuse me. So we're all here today with a similar goal, providing the best education to our children within the budget. I think the people involved in these decisions, I think we need to think more about the people involved in these decisions, the teachers, and most importantly, the children. We're all in this room because we value education. We have common goals to provide the children of Medfield with the best public education that we can. I implore us all to work together to prioritize the budget to keep the people in mind. Nothing can replace a teacher. Teachers are called educators because they're the ones educating our children. Let's remember that the schools are not a business. Businesses are driven by budget cuts. If our schools are being run like a business, then we're doing this at the expense of some children's educations. And every child counts and every teacher counts. So please reconsider taking out the 3 middle school teachers. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Sorry. Hi, my name's Lori Gross. I just have one clarification. On the budget, it said a removal of 3 middle school teachers. Has it been confirmed that they would all be from 6th grade?
No.
Or, okay.
Well,
The positions themselves, but not the actual teachers. I mean, so there's a process and a reduction in force, and we're working with the association on that right now. What we're waiting for right now is the certification, licensure, et cetera, from all the teachers, the verification of that, and then we'll start looking at the individual. But the positions themselves, yes, 6th grade, but it might be from teachers from different grade levels. There's a lot of layers to this. It's not just saying that 3 people are going somewhere else. There's a lot of layers.
And if I could just add, I think there's some misinformation with the 6th grade clusters right now. That 16 to 18 number that's been out there is a half a cluster right now. So right now in the 6th grade, there are 2.5 clusters. My daughter's in a class with, and she's a 6th grader, there are 23 kids in her class right now. Her education is no different from when I had a daughter who was in a class size of, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19. So the teachers and the amount of work that the teachers put in, and I would definitely argue with anyone who said that the difference with the education that they're receiving between 18 kids and the 23 kids that are in her cluster now, her experience is lights out in the cluster that she's in. And she's in one of those 23 students per cluster. So if you think that just a number is going to change their experience, I would argue that that is not always the case. The teachers here in Medfield with her cluster of 23 kids is a phenomenal experience for her. She and her friends, I mean, they're all different students, different learners. Her experience here in Medfield, and directly because of the teachers that she has, and we've been in different clusters with different class sizes. So I just want you to know that some of those numbers, 16 to 18, is not every single cluster here in Medfield. That smaller cluster is the number that's been used to identify all the clusters in the 6th grade, and that's not accurate. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone has the accurate numbers.
Good evening, Dr. Marsden. I want to thank you for, Leo Brem, 249 South Street, two students in the schools, well, one and one on the way, so look out. She's tougher than the other. No, I want to thank you. As I've said before, I'm an administrator in school districts, and I've been through this process, so I know what you're up against, and it was a well-prepared presentation. I have a few questions and points. First, just to address school choice, just from misinformation, the districts only get $6,000 no matter where they come from, which will increase to $8,000 this coming year, which was a recent increase at the state level. In most school districts in our situation do not vote it, not because of the money, but because usually we have a space issue in our schools, which I'm sure we do. We walk through our schools, and you probably are all aware of that. And that's through experience. My question is about the remaining 1.9% that's not currently covered in the budget, which rough numbers is approximately $600,000 is the gap between the 4% and the 5.9. Is that around accurate?
You mean the 4% target that the warrant
the warrant committee target.
Correct.
Right, so what's your question about
So
that,
the
Leo?
question is there a list formulating to close that gap? And on that, what is top of the list to be sacrificed? And then the other part is around contingency around the space issue in preparation for the fact that I appreciate the extra FTEs at next year's 2nd grade, of which I'm a parent, so obviously I really appreciate that. But at the same time, as you mentioned, we are a very popular town, and we have a raging nightlife now. I don't know who said that otherwise, but so who would want to not move here? And as houses come on the market, as we all know, they get snatched up, and usually our 4-bedroom homes do not get snatched up by the empty nesters moving into town. So I was wondering if we have buried contingency in there for the extra teacher for whatever grade level needs it, and as well as do any of those FTEs fall on that short list to be cut if the 1.9 can't be closed on that delta? Thanks.
So I can respond to that. So none of those FTEs are on the short list. We started looking at making reductions in supplies and materials. That's our first thing we're looking at. We want to make sure that we hang on to all of our staff. We're waiting to get some feedback from you folks tonight. That's what the public hearing's about. So we're working on that. That's the trick of it, right, Leo? I mean, getting from 6.75 to 5.9 wasn't the hard part. It's the 5.92 to the 4.0 that's the hard part, and I think that's the work we've got to do. Last year we did some work right at the very end with the warrant committee, ended up above 4%, so there isn't a short list yet. We're working on that, but those FTEs are there. They're in there. And in terms of a contingency, we would have had that had we not had to do some other unanticipated expenses in the last few months. For this FY18, we've had some building issues that were unanticipated with boilers, and we had about $30,000 worth of boiler repairs that had to be done that were unanticipated, some roofing things. So that, along with the additional aids, really took up any contingency we had for FY18. We're hoping that's not going to occur in FY19.
Jeff, can you talk a little bit about the spending freeze that we put in?
Sure, yeah. So we have a spending freeze on right now in district. So we're only doing payroll and essential purchases right now. We did that about a month ago, and we'll do that right up until April vacation, reevaluate everything April vacation week, and then see whether we can open up for additional purchasing. So it's the second time we've done that since I've been here. I know that it's something that districts do when unanticipated events happen and you need to pay for them. So that's what we're in right now. Payroll is the most important thing for us to make, so we want to make sure we get that, and we'll have a better sense of where we are coming up for break.
Can you also, Jeff, I don't know that everybody in the room understands where the 4% number comes from. Can you, or do you want me to talk about that?
From the warrant committee?
Yeah.
So it's just, one of the things that we meet the warrant committee has a pretty big responsibility. They're not just, we look at everything through the school lens. The warrant committee has to look at the entire town's lens. And, from their perspective, they feel like 4% is something, and the town feels like 4% is something they can support. And that's without an operational override. So I think that if we were looking at going above 4%, or even what we're doing now, we'd have to look at doing an operational override for FY19.
And I guess I would say even at 4%, that means that our taxes can only go up by about 2.5%. You're all familiar with Prop 2.5. That doesn't really mean that the revenue goes up by 2.5%, but if our budget goes up by 4%, it means that, and I'm thrilled to have this happen because I'm on the school committee, but it means that if I were on the water commission or the some public safety commission, I'd be saying, well, why is my budget going up by less than 2%? Because there is a trade-off on the side.
No doubt. Oh, no.
Hello, I'm a little bit nervous, so hopefully I'll do okay. I'm Tara Olivetto. I live on Lee Road. I'm a parent of a 5th grader and a 3rd grader, so I am living those teachers that you've cut. I'm living it. It's gone through the grades. But I'm also an educator, and I've worked in a community the complete opposite of Medfield, and right now I'm working somewhere, one of the comparable communities, that does have smaller class sizes. And I would love to talk to you about how class size does matter. And I'm sure every person in this room feels that way. And as a parent, you would feel that way. You have these little people, and you send them off, and they're in the hands of different adults taking care of them all day. And the smaller the class size, I don't even think it's arguable that you're going to get more attention if you have dedicated teachers. And as Mrs. Watson said, that's what Medfield is full of. It's full of teachers, especially in the elementary level, where they're doing everything. Their mom, their dad, they're everything to these little people. So, to the point of class size, as we talk about going on to the middle school, and I was looking at the budget, and I think, oh, isn't that wonderful that last year we have a director of social and emotional learning. That's fabulous. They're going on, their bodies are changing. They just watched the puberty video last week, so that was a big hit for everyone. But with that, even though it's a chuckle, that's going to bring on many changes for them. So we're sending them on to a new building where they're having many more demands. They have to switch classes. And then the class size, maybe it does stay the same, but and I would like to know the exact numbers, because if the math and ELA is going from 16 to 18 right now to 23 to 24, that's a big difference. And that's great for the current 6th graders that they have small class sizes, but I don't really care about them. I'm more concerned about my son and my daughter as they're going. And as we think about the whole social and emotional learning piece, making the class sizes bigger kind of seems to contradict some of the goals. Goal number 2 was supporting and developing the health and social and emotional well-being of all students and staff. Goal number 3 was developing the whole child. And goal number 4 was fostering a collaborative and communicative and consistent education for all students. So as Kristen said earlier, I would just implore you to think about that. If you can have these goals, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect. And I'm very thankful to all the teachers and to you donate your time, but I just want, if there's any room to think about this issue and how it will impact not just my children, but other people's children in this room, and the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bonnie Merced. I know that some of you in front of me right now have seen me at many school committee meetings in the past. I care very much for the Medfield Public Schools. One thought that I had about middle school, I have a current 6th grader right now whose core teachers, what I mean by core is English, math, science, and social studies, 3 of whom are 6th grade cluster teachers, one of whom is an 8th grade teacher who also teaches 1 6th grade or possibly 2 6th grade classes. So you're gonna have to bear with me because I did some math, didn't graduate from Medfield schools, but I came up with—
Does that mean we should trust it or not trust it?
Oh, totally trust it.
it's me, come on. Trying to be funny, yeah. Okay, so when I took the class projected enrollment, which was based on the handout at the, sorry, I have a lot of papers here, at the school committee meeting in the fall, the projected enrollment for the next year's sixth grade is 187 divided by 8 teachers, which would be 2 per core, is what people are concerned about, would be about 24 per class. But then when I look at 6 to 8 enrollment, because in middle school, some teachers shift around and teach different classes, I was looking at a total population for the current 6 to 8 at 622 divided by 35 core teachers, which came out to an average of 18 kids per class. Then I went to next year's projected 6 to 8 enrollment, which comes out to 597 kids. And then you subtract the 3 teachers, you get 32 core teachers, so you get an average of 19 students, which is not a huge difference between the 18. So if you're following my math, what I'm asking is, can we alleviate the concerns of some of the, I don't know, because I don't know the answer to this, but can we alleviate the concerns of some of the current 5th grade parents by maybe hoping that some of those 7th and 8th grade teachers that had higher class sizes, that one 8th grade class that's now graduating, that's a bigger class than the incoming one, would be able to teach down, or I shouldn't say down, to teach a lower grade to alleviate some class size frustrations. Clearly that's, that is a possibility. Obviously everybody wants 3 clusters. But what are your thoughts on that?
Nat, you want to take that one? Sure. Nat and I talked about this, so sure.
For the 5th grade parents, you probably want to introduce yourself.
That's all right. Hi, I'm Nat Vaughn. I'm principal at Blake. So it's a complicated answer, Bonnie. Yep. No, I'm just referencing that's a complicated answer. The middle school model is an expensive model. I mean, to be very frank, and a big piece is because we want to have clusters, which is essentially creating smaller schools within a school. So it's not as simple. We don't look at it as a 6 through 8 number. That becomes a misleading number. That would be if we were a junior high model, to be very honest. It would not have common planning time. It would not be a cluster experience. So currently, just to kind of clarify, right now we have 2 and sort of 3/4 clusters. It's like, it's a little misleading. The sea turtle cluster currently in 6th grade, and this has been the case for the past 6 years about, we've had a smaller cluster. And what it is the social studies classes on that cluster are being taught cross grade. So in some elements too, it's trade-offs. Everything with scheduling and looking at it is trade-offs. Students next year, some of those, so the sea turtles currently, it's not ideal either. They don't have a pure cluster model. Their social studies teachers aren't at cluster common planning time. And I'm saying, I think you know I'm incredibly biased about our school and our staff. I would echo exactly what Aaron said about our staff. And those, I mean, if I start crying about our staff, that's a normal thing. But to be very honest with you, so I think that's important too. I do want to reference that it is misleading in that way. So when we're looking at the numbers, we're dividing by 8 to answer your question, because it's 2 clusters that are. When you start getting in the teachers off grade, that's sort of, pardon the expression, you're bastardizing the cluster experience. Because those teachers will not be at common planning time, they will not be coordinating, and that's a trade-off. Because the other thing too is, and I'm not trying to, we really try to not put a value judgment on some academics versus others. Even though the hot button subjects are always English and math. But social studies right now in the sea turtle cluster, for those students that are on a larger class sizes, their teachers are going to be at common planning times. Greg's a teacher in that moment right now. Greg Cohen is a 7th grade social studies teacher. He teaches one section of social studies in 6th grade. So is that something we could entertain? Yeah, but as you said, that gets into borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And what's the end game piece? Because then you have a core teacher who's not at any of the common planning times, may not be at IEP meetings, may not be at those pieces. So there are trade-offs. So it's a long-winded answer to that way, and I'm happy to share with anyone in that manner. Does that answer the question?
Thanks, Nat.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm back. I will be here for a little bit. Sorry. That explains it because I have a sea turtle. So there you go. Okay. Sorry, fifth grade parents. I was trying for you there. Okay, so back to class size. I'm just going to throw out this sheet, which is, I believe, the projections from the November school committee meeting that you were basing the numbers on for the presentation. So. Again, because I apparently love math, I did my own calculations here, and I didn't realize we were going to 10 sections of second grade. Hooray, that's awesome. So about average class size is 20.3. I don't mean to divide children into fractions, but that means that there will be a class that is 21, fine. The current second grade class is 195, 24.4 students per class. Going to next year, they will be in third grade, hopefully, at a projected enrollment of 202 divided by 9, because you're adding one more teacher in, which would be 22.4 for the average size. So concerned there, I mean, that's a good number. School committee is recommending 23. We know everybody counts in a classroom, would be if our enrollment changed drastically. So I'm assuming that enrollment will be looked at again in May, June.
Absolutely.
To determine, would there be a number that if we went above 23 that we would consider deploying a or we called it a to be deployed teacher?
Yeah, I think we're looking at, there's a couple of issues around that, and that was one of the things we talked about this year. If we have an influx of, say, 18, 19, 20 kids in a particular grade level, then we look to add another classroom in that grade level. However, it gets very difficult when you have kids come in and you're going to break up classrooms that have already been made. They've already met their teacher move-up day. And then, oh, by the way, you get a letter saying you're going to be in a different classroom. We try to avoid that as much as we can. So we have to just take a look at what the projections are relative to what's actually coming in. We got a lot of kids over the summer last year, unexpected. So if we have some reserve there, we're going to try to do that, but we weren't so lucky in FY18 to be able to do that. We were pretty tight in that budget. I mean, if you remember last year in FY18, we were down to 44, 50,000 going back and forth the warrant committee on.
Right.
So it's pretty tight. There's not a lot of wiggle room in FY18. We're hoping to have a little more wiggle room in FY19 to do that.
Okay, so that makes sense. That's why I mentioned the May, June, because we come out with our class placement. But I do think that parents are expressing such great concern that we might be okay with shuffling kids around if we're talking about a really large class size, because it's better for kids, better for teachers.
Sure.
So now I'm going to get to my own child's class, which is the current third grade, which I am actually concerned the most about. There's currently 184 children in that class, 23 per class, which is recommended school committee 23, so we're okay. Projected next year is going to be 190, which is 23.75, which means there'll be 6 classes of 24 kids and 2 classes of 23. And if we were to receive just 8 more children over the summer or from now until May, we would be up to 25 students per class for next year's 4th grade. So this is a major concern for me because on a personal note, I have added to the heavy boy population because I have a son, but this is a very boy-heavy class, which is very unusual in Medfield because we're not a neighborhood districted community, but it makes for some challenges with teaching. Not that boys aren't wonderful, but when you're talking about grouping kids, you just don't have that diversity there. And so I'm very concerned about that class size, and I'm going to appeal to school committee to please look at this class and really, really scrutinize that, because it's a concern for me. It is not 23 per class, it is 23.75 right as of next year.
Bonnie, what number are you using for projections?
So I have 190, which is right here on...
Right, yep, that's what I just want to double check that.
Did you have that?
I do, yes.
Okay. Cool. Okay. I think I'm done advocating for class size for now. Thank you for your attention to that. Okay. My one question is, we're adding a first grade classroom, an additional first grade classroom, and I know we have limited space, so I was just curious as to what the plan was and how we're going to fit that in.
Sure, so we actually had to reduce our options for preschool next year
Okay.
in order to have a class, so that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we built up that the last few years and gave lots of options to parents, but we had to remove a couple of those options to take one of those classrooms for first grade.
Okay, great. And then I just wanted to thank you for including the line items this year for the first time. It was really helpful for someone like me who just loved to dig in, so here we go. It would be really helpful to see previous year's actual spending versus what we're budgeting, because then we could make a better reference point. So that's just
Right, so we did that in the summaries, the FY19 actuals. We
Okay.
did that, so we didn't do it in that particular one, the line item, but we did it in the summaries.
Okay. All right, so I'm just wondering, school committee, it says other expenses, you sort of talked about it going digital with the policy.
Right.
But the one question I had is that it's up 300%. So the 20,000 is up 300% in spending from 2016. So I'm just trying to figure out how putting policies into digital format is costing that much, or if there's something else in
Well,
that
I think
line.
we should put it in context. The line item's $20,000, right?
Yes.
I think it's 20,000, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it's $14,000 to $17,000 to do that.
To put it in digital format.
Well, it's to rewrite the policy, put it in digital format. If you go to most districts on their website, MASC, so the Mass Association of School Committees, they do this for most towns. In fact, our current one was done by MASC probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
So now it's just the updating of all that, digitizing it. So whenever the school committee votes a new policy, we send it to them. They update it, they host it, everything. They take care of everything for us.
Okay.
So it's pretty common. We just need to get there.
All right, I have more questions. They're just questions. Okay. On page 2, I can give you the line item number, but it's,
that'd be helpful.
I'm trying to interpret abbreviations here. Student Services Instructional Supervisor. Again, I'm not judging that we're putting money into this, but I'm just trying to figure out why it went up 2,732% from 2016.
Wait,
So
what
that's-
what line item again?
Okay, hold on, I will find it. This is my one shot,
So that's the additional, the restructuring, the special education administrative piece. That's the team chairs and all that. They're all in there.
2,000% increase, so it went from 20,000 in 2016 to now $562,229.
All right, what line item are you on?
I am on line item 49. It's on page 2,
So we reclassify those, Michael?
1222. Do you- oh,
The DESI reclassification? Can you say that louder so everyone can hear?
Reclassification to match the defense. So at the end of the year report, we have to match next year's defense. Those are reclassifications from one category to another.
That's what I thought, but then I was trying to figure out where the negative 2,000% came from. So shouldn't have gone from a 2016, you should have seen the reduction and then seen the increase.
The line item is much greater. So you're not going to see a percentage change that great because you're looking at dollar value.
Right.
And dollar value is smaller than where the category that it came out of. So if you look
Right.
at,
So it's moving from,
educational instructional teachers, look at special education instructional teachers, that quarter category is about 1.something million. So you have a bigger dollar value. The percentage of decrease is going to be worth differently than a smaller number where you're going to have a bigger percentage.
That makes sense. So there were a bunch of different categories that got blended into one.
there are positions from across the district that got moved. So you'd move one from each, say, grade level.
Right.
You wouldn't notice a difference because as you carry the contract forward, the other lines, the other salaries in that line are going to go up. And then this one is just they all got moved. This was a result of a lot of work Michael had with the state and the warrant committee to clarify the budget a couple of
Okay.
years ago.
All right, that's what I figured. I just thought,
Yeah, I mean, so the way the
I'd double
budget's
check.
structured with the functions and all that, we don't have control over that. The state tells us how to do it, what you have to put things under, so.
Okay, so then the exact same title is under line item number 27 for 24,000. So I was just wondering, is that the same thing?
So student services, instructional supervision. What was the number on the other one?
It's 27 and 49.
49.
That's the position we added in last
Yeah,
year's
but
budget.
it's the same thing.
27 was
27 and 49, Michael.
the position we added in last year's budget.
It's a $20,000.
Yeah, it's a different origin number.
Sorry, you can always get back to me. You have
Yeah,
my
it's a different origin number,
contacts.
that's all.
That's fine.
It's one of the
You know
aids,
who I am.
it's one of the aids we added in last year's budget.
Okay, I was just curious because it had the exact same title, so I was, all right. Last thing with the line item budget is the electrical costs. So I'm just trying to figure out, this Memorial went up by 67% from 2 years ago. Wheelock up 20% from 2 years ago. Dale Street up 50% from 2 years ago. The Medfield High School up 28%, and then the high school was down 20%.
Sure. So one of the things that we worked with the warrant committee on is that we need to do some revolving accounts in electricity, and we had to use some of that to offset. So the electricity at the high school has not gone down by any stretch of imagination, but we're paying for some of that through revolving accounts in rebates we get from the electrical company. So that's why that's the way it is.
Revolving accounts,
Yep.
okay. All right.
I wish it were going down.
I just was such a drastic
It's
difference.
a big change, yeah,
It
but that's
was-
just offsetted by rebates.
It stood out to me. Okay, so the last questions that I have, I think some of the slides that you had from earlier tonight were from cleargov.com comparing the
Right.
district to other districts.
Right.
So when I went on there, because you had told us about this, I forget when, at one of the school committee meetings, and I got curious. And it came up with comparisons. And the districts that they chose were a little different from the ones that you chose, but I got Dover, Sherburne, I didn't put it in, they decided it, Weston, Wayland, Wellesley, Westwood, Hopkinton, Sharon, Norwell. And then when I went in by different categories, the percent comparisons were sort of concerning to me. So it said superintendent spending is 36% higher than comparable districts. School committee is 40% higher than comparable districts. Instructional teachers' spending is 14% lower than comparable districts. Paras and aides are 24% lower than comparable districts. And guidance counseling and testing are 24% less than comparable districts. Special ed is 26% lower than comparable districts. And again, you pointed out the per pupil spending that we have is 17% less.
Right.
So I didn't know if there was any explanation.
Sure. So the first part, looking at the superintendent and school committee one, if you looked at the overall district leadership, do you see what that, remember that number was? It was minus 9%. So it was 9% lower than comparable districts. So then you dig a little bit deeper and you start looking at it, and you may not have had a chance to look at the other districts that we're compared to in that. But if you do, you look at, for instance, I think maybe Westwood or another one of the ones, when you go through the details of the function, they'll have separate functions in there. It'll say superintendent, assistant superintendent, HR, business and finance. They break it up in 4 or 5 different categories. We don't have an assistant superintendent. Okay, we don't have an HR department. So with us, it gets broken up into 2, business and finance and superintendent. So that's why those numbers are off that way. Because the overall is minus 9%.
Right, no, I saw that. But then I looked at those comparable districts, and their
Yeah.
population is so much greater. The ones that have assistant superintendents have larger,
Not really, Wayland has that. They're the same as us.
okay, so Wellesley has one in there at
Wellesley has
5,000.
many more students than us, yeah.
Yeah, and Westwood
But that's how ClearGov works, so that it's broken up into just two, the superintendent and business finance versus assistant superintendent, HR, superintendent, and all, so that's what throws it off.
Okay.
The other piece, I don't know, Michael, if you want to add anything to it, you work with ClearGov, so I don't know if you want to. Sure, you can add to it if you want.
You got to speak up, Michael, your voice was too low.
Yeah, grab a mic.
Actually, do you want to bring it up so we can show them?
Want to bring up ClearGov?
Yeah, why don't you bring it up?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Did you just drop the mic?
Almost. I wish it was Tom Brady. So we're going to bring it up, but if you look at the districts that they're comparing us with, if you go into the other districts, so let's bring up either Dover-Sherburne or Westwood. You can see that Dover-Sherburne, they don't have all the data for Dover-Sherburne. They also don't have all the data, I believe, for Weston. So when you go in there, it will tell you data not complete at this time. If you look at Westwood, which it's one of the communities that they're comparing us with, they have 5 major categories that they take the functions and break out the cost of central office. In Medfield, those categories are broken down into 2 functions, business office or superintendent's office, because we don't have and we don't report in our end-of-year report any functions or any cost in assistant superintendent or HR.
And then the other part with the school committee, that the town and the school committee have an agreement with Schedule 19 for the end of the year report. Want to talk about that when I get to it?
So every town has an agreement with, it's required by law that every town has an agreement with their town. How did they distribute cost? But there are indirect costs that have to be broken back down into the schools. All those costs are done differently depending on the community. When I was in Dedham, the costs were 60-40 split. The costs here are split a little bit differently. They actually split, and we have a breakdown. If you want to go to the town hall and see the accountant, she can give you the breakdown on the different functions and how they're broken down. So every community has a different agreement. That agreement was done a long time ago between the school committee and the selectmen, and that's how they figure out the indirect costs. Those costs are built into where you see the line item that says school committee, because they take those indirect costs, the agreement between the school committee and the selectmen, and they put those indirect costs into the school committee line item, because that's where they go on the end-of-year report.
I think it would benefit from an example of indirect cost.
Indirect cost, workman's comp, unemployment.
Plowing the park.
Plowing is an indirect cost. A share of the cost from the accounting department, from the town hall, those are all indirect costs.
I can assure you that I'm going to school.
Can't get it up?
It's not going up.
All right, so if you have time, you want to stop by my office, I can show you exactly what we're talking about, but there's 4 different or 5 different categories depending on the community that we're being compared to. Those costs are divided by those functions, where in Medfield they're only divided into 2 functions, which is superintendent and business office, and there's a couple of districts that we're being compared to that the data is not complete at this time.
I just wanted to say I'm done. I see people taking out their cell phones. I got it. Thank you so much for taking my questions. I'm going to go back to that 3rd grade class, the current 3rd grade class. That's my #1 plug, and that class size. And I appeal to you, please, 23.75, and that's without anybody additional moving in. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Okay, my name is Rob Wilson. I live at 5 Stewart Street. I am a total newbie on this. My preparation is scribbling a few notes on this piece of paper, so I don't have, quite things written out the way that others do. But I guess what I would say is, as I've been sitting here tonight and kind of thinking about this, I feel like I'm at the wrong meeting, basically. I'm going to just make one observation, and I guess then I'll ask a question. And this is going to seem maybe really simplistic, so I fear that I may be damaging my reputation with everyone in this town right now, but I'm going to go for it. So there's one reason that Medfield has the housing prices that it does and can charge the property taxes that it does, and that's the schools. right? Certainly, they don't even have fluoride in the water, as we've discovered. We just moved in. You have to pay for your own trash collection. I mean, I feel like it's a total a la carte system here, which is nice. Like, that's cool. Don't get me wrong.
Transfer station is more fun on a Saturday.
I actually agree with that. I kind of like, I've bought into the transfer station thing. So my question, though, as a newbie, again, and maybe there's others here like this, what meeting do I need to go to help them appreciate that the reason that people move in, like myself and others, is for the schools, and a 4% increase ain't enough, even a 6% isn't enough?
If I may.
Please do.
Rob, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. You're welcome. You're welcome any night. The answer to your question is the warrant committee meeting and town meeting. If you haven't been to town meeting yet, you absolutely should go. And
all of you.
And
get your shares.
I want to say that it is the warrant committee because it's the warrant committee that has to approve the town's budget and they vote on how money's allocated. But I want to stress the majority, not everybody, but the majority of the warrant committee are also strong supporters of schools. And I don't want to leave anyone with the impression, and maybe I have in the past, maybe I've been too strident in the past, that the warrant committee doesn't care about the schools or doesn't value the schools. Already at 4%, we're getting more than, there's a point at which you sort of can't pay for your plowing and you can't pay for your water treatment, you can't pay for your public safety. I don't know what that point is, and I don't care very much because I sit up here, not on those committees and not on the Board of Selectmen. So the first thing I would say is that the warrant committee is clearly the place to go. And the reason they're still the place to go, even though I think the majority of them have always supported our budget, and I'm sure will, when we get to a right point this year, support our budget again, is it's the warrant committee that has the sense, they're appointed by the town moderator, by the way. They have the sense of the town, and it's the warrant committee that says either this year we will or we will not support an operational override. Now, since you're new to town, I'm just going to take the opportunity and give a quick lesson on what an operational override is. Would that be helpful to anybody or not helpful? Okay, so when Prop 2.5 went into place in Massachusetts, that meant that you can't raise taxes in any town by more than 2.5% at town meeting, or if you're a city, that the city can't do it. That's the maximum amount your taxes can go up as a rate every year. We as a town can raise more tax revenue in two ways. One is called a debt exclusion, and we'll have one in all likelihood this year, although I'm not sure we'd need one. But to pay for the feasibility study at Dale, we'll have a debt exclusion. A debt exclusion is effectively to borrow. You're not raising the town's tax levy, you're borrowing more money. So we're all paying more money in taxes, we're all paying more money in taxes, but it doesn't change the actual tax rate. So you could have the rate go up by 2.5%, and you can still have a debt exclusion to borrow. And we've had a lot of those in recent years for the public safety building, for the public works building, and we've had a lot for the schools, frankly, before I was on this committee, dating back. Operational overrides are effectively raise the town's tax rate and can go up by more than 2.5%. That requires two things. It requires a vote of 2/3 of town meeting, right? It's 2/3 of town meeting? Okay. And of the majority of voters at a ballot box. When you do that, then you have more money that year and in ensuing years. So there was a time period in Medfield's history where, those of us who have older kids will remember, where maybe every other year, we had an operational override. And that's how taxes got really high in Medfield, and it changed a lot of things, for the better in some ways. It changed the quality of services we can provide. But at some point, the warrant committee, and I don't disagree with them at this point, said, look, there's got to be an end to these constant tax increases, because we all still have to live here. And there are people, some of us in town are younger than others, and we can count on a certain level of income going up every year, and others are at levels in their lives where their income's not going up. And if taxes are going up dramatically and their income's not going up, you're effectively forcing people out of town. And as I get older along towards that age, I used to think that would be a good idea. Force all the old people out and all the new people move in, we pay more taxes, it's great. I'm getting along towards that age, I realize it's not such a great idea anymore. But So we had a period of maybe every other year, we'd have an operational override. The last time we had one was 7 years ago. And I'll be honest with you, there was a little bit of, well, there was creative financing in that year, okay? So we had gone through a couple of times where the union hadn't gotten a raise because we were in really dire financial straits as a state, and we had to make up for some of that. We had a lot of other things that had not been addressed for those same reasons, 9C cuts, you know what those are. The state actually was taking money back that it had promised us. So we had an operational override, and what we did with that first year was we bought all new computers, which by the way are now completely obsolete. They're anchors, right? But at the time we bought all new computers, and if your kids have smart boards or overhead projectors, you know, the project onto those all came from that spending that year. But because we did it not through a debt exclusion, but by raising the tax levy, it meant that the next year and the couple of years after that, you had a lot more in the tax levy to be able to pay, because you took that money that you had a one-time expenditure and now you could put it into the operating budget. So you could pay for increases in transportation, increases in teacher salaries, and other increases, adding new services. And so for those probably 3 years, maybe even 4 years after that operational override, our budget increases were on the order of about 2 to 3%. And the reason they're now getting to be a lot more is because that money is long spent. And we're still adding new programs, which we believe in. And we're still adding, you know, important things, and we're still taking care of the last teacher's contract. There was some of our teachers at the upper end were way behind other districts, and we had to make that up. Because that's our responsibility, not because they force us to. We're all here. I'm married to a teacher. I was a teacher. We want to do the best we can for them. And we want to keep them. So that's sort of the difference. So when I say you have to go to the warrant committee, I'd hate to see pitchforks and firebrands going to the warrant committee, because I believe they all care about this town broadly, but they don't have the luxury that we have of looking at it, that I have anyway, of looking at it just on the school budget side. Because I'll go there and say I want 8%. And there are people on the warrant committee, some of them who might be in the room, I don't want to call anybody out, who probably would give us that if they could. But that would mean you might not get a fireman at your house in time, or your street's not going to get plowed in time. We're going to have 2 and 3 snow days in a row instead of just one. You know, you see a lot of communities had a double snow day from one storm. We didn't have to do that because we had a great public works department. Now, could we have less of a public works department and have another snow day? Maybe, but that's not a value decision that we're up here able to make. That's a value decision that town meeting has to make. So, is that an answer? I got off on a rant there for a minute.
That was February 26th at 7. Is that the next one?
That's our next our next full committee meeting with the warrant committee. Okay. The warrant committee meets every week.
They meet every week on Monday at this time. And actually, I have to tell you that one of the most instructive things I have ever done is go to warrant committee meetings that have nothing to do with the schools. Because then you're understanding how the other half of your tax revenue and grants and everything else are working. And you see what the other areas of things like clean running water that you may also want to avail yourself of, and what those demands are right now. Doesn't really mean that, you're like, oh yeah, well, they should definitely have it more than we do. But you do start to see there's a system with many cogs, and that there's no uncomplicated answer to anything. So if I may plug for always trying to avail yourself of better information and more information about Medfield. And then there's also about how there's a larger level then about what the warrant committee receives in terms of their budget and revenue projections for the year. And so that's kind of the third level there. So, from kind of the top down, we're at like level 3 down here at this point when we're trying to figure this out. So,
thank you.
Thank you for my other half of the rant.
I'll tell you from my own perspective, I think there's no way we continue to go without operational overrides prospectively. At some point, it will be necessary because we are quickly approaching as a town what's known as a structural deficit, where our costs just naturally are outstripping, without adding any new programs or any new things, are going to outstrip revenue because we don't have any commercial tax base at all.
I just want to see some people, when you hear all that the town needs, and when you hear about, 42 million that in just our building, water, sewers, and projects that the town has in the pipeline, that those are not small things to tackle. In this room tonight, I see selectmen, I see warrant committee. These are people who are not just, kind of getting information secondhand. They're people that truly care about Medfield. They wouldn't do the jobs that they do if they didn't truly care about Medfield. I think I can very confidently speak for those of us on the school committee. We wouldn't care about the teachers, the kids, whether we have a kid in that class or not. I do, and I think all of us, we wouldn't put in this number of hours in dedication. I see teachers here that my kids have had that I truly have changed my kids' lives. None of us do what we do for any other reason than we are truly committed to the town, to our children. I see selectmen here. They care about your children. They care about all of our children. But I think it's also good to get a great education. I was just at an Affordable Housing Trust meeting on Saturday morning, and there was a group of Medfield residents, all volunteers, at 8 in the morning, talking about how do we manage some of our affordable housing issues. And I asked the question about, well, how do we build all this? What if there are children in some of these proposals? And in my Sullivan said, quite honestly, the state will tell you to build more schools. And it's frustrating when you hear that, and you know how often you submitted the SOI for Dale Street and how difficult, you don't just build a school because you need more space. So I think that these are all really important questions to ask of multiple committees in town. None of these people take their job lightly, or they wouldn't do it if they didn't care about the future of the town and our schools. So I think that, and as we heard even from Nat, I don't think any of these decisions, whether it's reducing a cluster size or increasing children in the classroom, none of those decisions are ever taken lightly. These are not people who ever take these decisions for granted, and there are many, many layers to these decisions. So I, for one, and I think the school committee so appreciates you coming, being so respectful, voicing your opinions, voicing your concerns. There are things that we definitely listen to as a committee. We've had children, your grades, your issues, your concerns, we take them very seriously. So I thank you all for coming out tonight. There's been a lot of useful information and feedback, so I just want to add that. Does anyone else have?
Are you going to ask to get money in the budget to heat this room next year when we have?
So, surprisingly, I was not going to speak tonight, but then I decided, why not? Because I always get up and speak. My name is Jennifer Hearn. I'm from 24 Hawthorne Drive. I love my town, and I love education, and I think most of the people who move to town love the education here as well, and love the town, and want everything to work out. So one thing, at a budget meeting, of course, the number one word that comes up is budget, 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 but I have to remind people, and I'm sure you guys really understand, this is about education, right? What is our education for public? It's research. What is educational research? What is the best practices, the pedagogical strategies that have been proven in leading communities and so forth? Research, practice, policy. Okay, those are the decisions, those are what inform educational decisions. I understand budget and the logistics of town resources and allocating them. Jeff,
sorry about that.
You did that on purpose.
It is. I have no idea what I did, but something.
Sorry, time's up, Mr.
Sorry, Jen.
No, in all seriousness, I do understand the crux of all the different factors and things that people have to factor into a budget. But I'm sure there are towns out there with far less resources, far worse teachers. We have awesome teachers, far less money than we have, who have become excellent educational communities because they use creative problem solving. I'm sure within our budget, you have lots of parents who care. Look at all the people here who want to help the teachers on their own time, you know. If you need help from the parents or the community in any way to get the funds you need to have the number of teachers that we need that are ideal for our students in this town. Because what are we talking about? We're talking about 4 teachers, right? The amount of time, I understand and I appreciate that you guys have done a lot for the lower elementary grades, because research shows you need really small class sizes in those grades to succeed and have longevity. I'm sorry, I'm really nervous tonight because I didn't actually prepare anything for a change. Longevity and academic success. We really appreciate it, Jeff, we do. Like, you worked really hard at it and you made it happen. However, I don't have, you know, upper elementary kids, I don't have middle school children, but I was a middle school teacher a very long time ago. And I understand their concerns. If we're talking about 4 teachers that we need to hire, that's, you said at their step level is what, $64,000, Mike, is that correct? So 4 teachers, we're talking about let's round up $250,000. We need $250,000 each year, at least start off next year. Can we find $250,000 somewhere in this budget? I'm pretty confident we could try to figure it out. $250,000. I mean, it's a very big budget. And I mean, are you laughing because you disagree, or are you laughing because you agree? I mean, people in this town do fundraisers for all sorts of crazy stuff all the time. Seriously, I'm having one at my house on February 10th for a preschool that calls itself Precious Beginnings. That's like, oh, you know, it's like, people care, Jeff. We need help, though. What we need is the school committee to make the case to the warrant committee, because you guys, you were the elected by the town. You're the experts, right? So we need you guys. We can support you. We can show up to warrant committee meetings. We could go to town meeting. We could vote with you. You know, I know people don't want to increase taxes, which is why you started the presentation off the way you did. It's clear, like, people would much rather lower taxes, myself included. But, you know, I don't really have a question, because I know you guys are really working at this. But I just want to make sure that the tail isn't wagging the dog. It's not the budget that's dictating my child's education. It's research, it's practice, it's policy, and how those intersect. Budget, logistics of town snow plowing, you know what? They can be factored in, but they shouldn't be the #1 factor in what educates my child. So thank you for all you've done. If you want to communicate to us how we can support you guys, we're here. We are here, okay? So thanks. I'm going to just...
Thanks, Jen.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is John Merrick, and I live at 37 Pine Street. First thing I want to point out to everybody here is that you have to remember that this budget is nothing more than a proposal. The warrant committee budget is nothing more than a proposal. The only entity in this town that can approve a budget are the citizens of this town at that town meeting. That's it. Until then, it's just a proposal. That is a very uniquely New England phenomenon. Anywhere else in the country, you'd elect somebody to approve the budget. Here, you approve the budget at town meeting. But you have to go, and you have to vote. That's something very important to remember. Until that town meeting, all of this is just a proposal. To the school committee. In full disclosure, I have a student who is a 5th grader, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with this whole proposal from a conceptual point. Obviously, we have a dip in the school population that started, I guess, 5, 6 years ago, is moving through the school system. It was higher before, apparently it's getting higher again, so there's a wave and we're at the trough, and the trough is now hitting the middle school. Somehow, I mean, we've been dropping teachers all along as this wave has moved through the elementary schools. We're at the middle school level, and now instead of losing one position a year, we're going to lose 3, and I'm not sure how that can work where the class size isn't going to be affected. But this wave's going to move forward into the rest of the middle school grades and then eventually the high school. Are we going to continually eliminate positions only to replace them again as the population grows? That seems to be extraordinarily disruptive, as you're pulling teachers out and then going and you have to go and rehire new teachers. I mean, doesn't it make sense at some point to kind of ride it out? I just conceptually having a difficult time understanding, are we going to be here next year deciding that we're going to lose 3 positions at 7th grade? And then the year after that, 3 positions at 8th grade? And then as we go into high school, we're going to start eliminating high school teachers, only to replace them as the population grows again? That doesn't seem to be a very wise strategy. When does it stop? I mean, okay, we've lost the elementary school positions. Are we going to go through this in middle school and high school too? I just, overarching concept seems rather strange to me. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katie Novak, and I have a very happy kindergartner at Memorial School. My son Connor has 20 kids currently in his class and is welcomed and appreciated and supported by a full-time teaching aide. He literally skips out the door every day going to school, excited to see his friends, participate in Writer's Workshop, and he was actually really sad when we had a snow day a couple weeks ago, which I couldn't believe because back when I was a student, snow days were awesome. So I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Marsden, for adding another teacher for 1st grade next year so that he can continue to have this wonderful experience that he's had so far. I feel like he's known, I feel like he's loved, I feel like he's taken care of in his class because he only has 20 kids. And Mrs. McAvoy is an incredible, wonderful teacher, and she does a great job to teach those 20 kids. So I just wanted to say thank you for adding that teacher into 1st grade. I just had a couple follow-up questions.
Sure.
So I just wanted to confirm that there are going to be 9 teachers for 1st grade next year. And it seems that coming in and families are moving in more and more starting in 1st grade because people are looking to establish in a school district. So I'm wondering, is there a contingency plan should we have that influx of students again over the summer? I know you mentioned a floater teacher. It seems like that potentially is off the table. So I'm just wondering what the plan is and if, there'll be meetings with Missy and other things like that come the springtime to kind of make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Katie, for those kind words.
Thank you.
That floater teacher was allocated to grade 2.
Okay.
So the one that we had talked about in the initial budget was allocated to grade 2. And then we're going to look at it. Missy, she'll email me every day when we start to get registrations, and we start to, track that and see what we have. And then, as I said earlier, we weren't able to do much of a contingency based on what happened in FY18, and we're hoping that doesn't happen again in FY19. So unexpected events that happen, costs that happen, prevented us from doing anything in FY18. So we're hoping that doesn't happen in FY19.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just add that the projections, look, projections suck, right? They're guesses. They're educated guesses made by people who do this for a living and know more about it than we do, or I do anyway, speaking only for myself. In Medfield, we have the highest ratio of births in the town to people enrolling in kindergarten. So that growth of people moving in is factored into the enrollment projections. We're down since FY10 about a little over 400 kids in the district overall, but it's not like that, we were surprised because it was more than we projected, But we always expect, based on birth numbers that we get that are reported to the town, that there are going to be a heck of a lot more kids here come kindergarten than there are when they're born 5 years earlier. So I just want to clarify that we don't get totally caught off guard by that. That's part of our decision-making, if that helps. Or maybe I'm just...
And I would say the other piece, too, is, the real game changer in terms of space at Memorial was adding full-day kindergarten 3 years ago. I mean, that really, when the district had 3,000 kids, there was no full-day kindergarten, and there were multiple half-day kindergarten classes where they could run 2 classes for every classroom. So that's something that I think the school committee, the teachers, we're all very committed to full-day kindergarten. We wouldn't want that to go at all. So that's kind of a real game changer in terms of the space issues that we have at Memorial.
Great. My name is Rebecca Venucci St. George, and I have a son who's in 2nd grade right now and a daughter who's going to go into kindergarten next year, and I really appreciate that full-day kindergarten. I just had a couple clarification questions. First of all, I just want to say I appreciate the financial stewardship that the superintendent and the school committee has been doing for the past couple of years, especially that I've been here in town, and that's exemplified in your detailed budget. And I know the volunteers in this room with the warrant committee, the selectmen, I appreciate all of your work. I'm just so grateful to all of you for that. So I just wanted to say that. So the first question is, you kind of answered it right now, but the projections that have been done in the past, how accurate have they been and how far off have they been in the past?
It really depends year to year.
It depends.
So they do a birth cohort projection, so they take that in consideration, but because of building and real estate, it's difficult for them to be right on. In my former district, they were pretty close because we didn't have that much influx of students in terms of the building. But I would say that in my 5 years here, they've been fairly close 3 out of the 5.
Okay.
In the time of the economic downturn where people weren't selling their houses, they were holding, they were overestimating, some cases significantly, the number of kids we had coming.
Gotcha. And to confirm, you're going to be putting 2 full FTEs in the upcoming 2nd grade, so the current 1st grade.
Correct.
Based on these projections. And they had, for the next year's projection, 203 projected versus the current grade 2 that has 202. Is that correct? So they got a whole teacher based on one different number?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we're looking at is really trying to keep that early childhood education lower, keep it in that 18 to 21, and that's K1 and 2. So that was really the focus there and the reason why we did that.
So, yeah, I just want...
And it's not because of the change from this year to next year. It's that this year's class size, what a lot of the parents in that grade will tell you, this year's class size, because we had unexpected kids enrolling in the current 1st grade, is higher. So it's not that we're adding just because it's going up by 1 and projected. It's really to fix a mistake from this year.
Okay, and so the current 1st grade is how many kids?
Current
195 or something?
175.
That was the projection, but the current...
No, that's the actual.
Oh, that's the actual 175, the current 1st grade?
No, it's more than
195, I thought.
195.
Yeah. And what's the current 2nd grade?
I missed the K number.
Let me pull it up.
The current 2nd grade, is that what you asked?
Current,
194.
current is okay, so 1st grade is 194, and 2nd is 195. That's what I have it here, and that's what I thought. And I'm not trying to, again, pay Peter to rob Paul, or whatever that saying is based on these numbers. It's just, yes, it is. But, and I do think that we all want smaller classes for all kids, and not just kindergarten and not just grade 5. We want it for everyone. It's just, I was just trying to figure out your methodology of picking where you're going, and so that's where I was trying to get at. And I appreciate the move in the right direction, but again, as it's been echoed, I don't want to take away from the older grades, because eventually my child will be in the older grade and then might be missing out in that environment as well. So just wondering how you got that number, but you kind of answered it. And then the other question was on the override. I really appreciated your kind of discussion of the override and how the history. I've only been in town for about 5 years, so I have not experienced the override in this town. And so the last override, you said 7 years ago, was that an education override?
Well, Yes.
Yes.
But when, this is a political hot button, okay? But I'll just.
Sorry to put you on.
I'll be honest. No, it's okay. I don't mind. I'm an elected official. In this town, and in most towns, it's a heck of a lot easier to pass an override for teachers, science programs, whatever it is, than it is for more public works folks or more, more money in those. So what gets put on the ballot is always money for education, okay? But by doing that, by raising the money for education, what you're actually doing is you're also enabling the town to put more money towards
Other.
public safety.
Yeah, other.
So it's a little bit of a political issue because, and I don't blame them for this, but the town side tends to couch most overrides, all overrides in this town, as for the schools. When in point of fact, what they're doing is they're bringing up the tax levy for everybody. That money just for that year goes to the school budget, but the tax levy goes up for everybody, and the money doesn't get, in future years, just allocated to the schools. So you might be able to hire, say, if we need to hire 3 police officers next year, it's very likely that that would be a time when you'd have an override, and it would actually be an educational override, because although the police department budget's going up more, I'm not trying to, this is why it's hot button, I'm not trying to pick on a department. It's easy, it's a heck of a lot easier. You'll all come out and vote for an override for schools. You might stay home, even if you support it, you might stay home for police officers.
Yeah, okay. Yep, and so this is my final thought. I think just to kind of comment on the gentleman who moved into town recently, I think one of the best ways that we all get involved is to be at these meetings and to go to the warrant meetings and to go to town meeting and meet with the selectmen and, be an active citizen. This is what we're all about. We're doing it not only for our kids, but for our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jess Raza. I live on Harding Street, and I have 3 kids. 2 are currently in the system. Just have a question about the way tonight is running. This is your public hearing on the budget vote, which I believe you said is due tomorrow. So does that mean tonight when we go home, you close your computers, you send in that budget, and it's done?
No.
Or is it edited based on what we're talking about tonight?
So one of my last slides, I had talked about how this is a really fluid process. So we are required to submit a budget to the town, but it's not the final budget to the town. So we'll be working for the next couple of months with the warrant committee, board of selectmen, et cetera, and getting to a number. But whatever they vote tonight becomes the school committee budget as we go forward.
But it'll change.
It'll change. Like, for instance, last year at this time, we were at 6.25% or something, and we ended up in the 4s at town meeting.
So like you said, it's a proposal.
Right,
It's the draft
right,
to go through
exactly.
now, and then it's still, with this input,
Correct.
might be changed.
Correct.
Thank you.
There's nobody else. I'm going to move to close the public hearing and move to a vote. Second. Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair?
So we have a motion on the table to
I move the superintendent's recommended budget, and if there's a second, I'd like to speak to the motion. How's that? You have to second it.
Second. All in favor?
No, I want to speak to the motion first. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. I'm going to vote in favor of the superintendent's recommendation. There's been a lot said about the school committee on public media, much of which I'm not on, but it manages to get forwarded to me. I want to assure you, I talk to the superintendent, I talk to the business director probably 3 or 4 times a week. We're not here rubber stamping anything, much less a budget. We've looked at as many ways as we can. There are other creative solutions. I mean, Mr. Potts raised one tonight. I disagree with it as a principle, but it's a creative solution to solving, in part, or moving towards solving this problem. At the end of the day, it is a question of setting priorities and being able to say, okay, if we have only so much money allocated to us as a school, how do we best do it, and to ensure that we keep a high-quality education? My kids are both in high school. They've been through Blake. I got to tell you, I know almost all the teachers at Blake, and to me, For you, your kids are going there, and it's personal for you. For me, the personal thing is, we may lose 3 of the best teachers in this district because we can't keep them. If they're not if we don't have enough attrition, and let's be clear, there will be retirements, there will be people who move out of district for one reason or another. There is attrition. I very much doubt we're going to lay any teachers off. But a teacher who teaches 6th grade right now may not want to teach 7th grade, or may not want to teach 4th grade, or wherever we may be able to move them to, and they may go elsewhere. And that, to me, would be a horrible loss. And I know that we may not be able to replace them in a couple of years, as we will try to do, with somebody with as much experience in this district and as much history in this district and commitment to excellence that Nat and his team infuse in all the teachers there. But we have to make choices, and it's a horrible choice. And we'll continue to work, to the last speaker's point, from now until town meeting to try to make a way to find $275,000. But that's a lot of money to find in a $36,000 budget. You can't just, $36 million budget, thank you so much. You know, the town does make choices. You guys, how many of you know what the pocket park is? How many of you know how much money we spent on the pocket park? I voted against that town meeting. It's not a lot of money, but it's money, in my view, we never should have spent for a couple trees between 2 buildings. And I'm being a little bit flip about that, but without planting a money tree there, right? Because that's what we have. It's a problem where we're allocating. People go to town meeting, community groups go to town meeting, they're all looking for money, and there are priorities set. So we as a committee can only make the decisions we make. Somebody said earlier, I wrote it down, I won't say specifically who it was, and I know she was being a little flip, but she was talking about class size. She said, I don't really care about them. And I know that for each of you, because I have 2 daughters, been through the district, been through the system, that for each of you, it's your own kid that is the most important thing. And look, I get calls about, I need more special education services. I get calls, we need we need more gifted and talented services. We need more teachers at this grade, or we need more teachers at that grade. My own daughter sent me here tonight, and I actually asked Jeff about it this morning, with a question about why in heaven's name we have new math textbooks at the 9th grade, but there's not enough for them to take home to do their homework. They have to either copy or figure out, why did we buy new textbooks and didn't buy enough for everybody to take one home? It's a good question, frankly.
It's a great question.
Right? But
I'm still wondering why we wouldn't do that.
So we have a lot of constituencies, and that's why we're here as elected officials. Leadership is making the very difficult decisions and disappointing some of you and making some of you happy. Ideally, we'd make all of you happy. That would make all of us happy. Because nobody, and there are towns, by the way, where people run for school committee to lower the school budget. Nobody here has done that. But I'm supporting the budget tonight because to me, having been through it, having talked with Michael, having talked with Jeff, it's the best foot that we can put forward today to try to meet the priorities that we have.
Is it still open, or are we done?
We're kind of done. Public forum is done. There's a pending motion. You can't be recognized while there's a pending motion.
Dang it. All right. Go visit 3rd grade tomorrow. Go hang out with 3rd grade. Trust me. You'll have fun.
Anything else on the motion? There is a motion. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for coming out. I move a 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back from recess, and we are going to reconvene the business of the Medfield School Committee. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from January 8th, 2018.
Madam Chair, the minutes are my responsibility. I have not yet had a chance to review them. I move that we table them.
Is there a second?
There's a second. I do actually have a correction to it, so.
Just send it to Francine. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. The next item on the agenda is the trip request approval for the Medfield High School Model United Nations trip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your packet, members of the committee, was a letter from Robert Parker asking you folks to approve that trip. They're going to Boston College, the Model UN, in March, and there will be a 2-night stay in Boston, and 2 of our history teachers, Rachel Buckingham and Perry Oasis, are coordinating that. Conference will be from March 16th to the 18th, and students will fund all the costs associated with the conference. I ask that you approve as presented by Robert.
I just had a question about this, Jeff. Don't we only have to approve if they're going out of state, or is it because it's
overnight. Yeah. Typically, Chris, but I think because it was overnight, they wanted to get...
Check the box, okay.
And the only other thing that I would ask for some of these, and I know everyone does it all the time, but this is a Model UN. I know it's the first year for the Model UN, but it's also the night of the freshman, sophomore semi-formal dance. So, and complete transparency, I'm a little biased because my daughter was originally planning on going on that trip, but she can't because of the semi-formal. So just a little,
Sure, make a note of that.
I always plug the calendar thing. I know it's difficult to get every single thing on the calendar, and and it's a great life lesson about making choices, so.
So my sense is on that, so we typically book those a year in advance, the dances, to get everyone, so that it probably was booked, and then the Model UN picked their dates.
And the BC one, I mean, they set their dates, and, we opted to go, so I totally understand that. That's just my little calendar plug.
Sure.
The next item on the agenda is...
You gotta vote for that.
I thought we already did.
No.
No. Okay.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Enjoy BC. The next item on the agenda is, there's one other item. We always list other items since posting on January 24th, 2018. There's a letter in your packet. This last Friday, Jess Riley, myself, the superintendent, Michael LaFrancesca, met with the police chief regarding an incident that happened at the high school between a staff member and a parent. And we just thought it was a good opportunity, after consulting with the police department and the school committee attorney, that we go over some of our procedures with the principals, and perhaps even develop a plan that maybe you could meet with the principals to go over some of our safety procedures after school hours. We do a great job as a school, I think, keeping our kids safe, and we just want to make sure we're ensuring the same safety for those after school in the building, whether it's our teachers, staff, superintendent. We want to make sure that we have a safe working environment for everyone, not only our students, but our staff and leadership team, superintendent as well. So it would be great to, if you could actually meet with the principals, develop some kind of plan, ask for their input about maybe developing some kind of plan, or their input around plans, procedures for security.
So looking at after school, after the school day hours.
Right.
Okay.
I think in our district, it's been commonplace, and obviously, as a town, we value an open campus, but I think in 2018, there are limitations on that, and we just have to make sure we're doing the best thing that we can for our staff to make sure everyone has a safe working environment. We want safe learning environments, and I think it's also important that we provide the same for after school for our teachers and administration.
Does it make sense for me to touch base with the principals on this, and then come back to you maybe in a March meeting with something? Just a report or?
Something specific, yeah.
Okay. All right, we can do that.
So maybe present, develop some type of plan with them in the next.
Yeah, we'll review what we normally do, and then try to, based on the feedback from Chief Meany and John and Shelley, we'll get a sense of what we need to do.
Okay, so we can put that on the agenda for.
Put it on there for March.
Meeting? And the next item on the agenda is the 2018-2019 calendar update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your packets was a second draft. After meeting with you folks last time, and then sitting down with the leadership team, we went through and tried to identify some dates that we could put on the calendar for release days. If you remember our last meeting, we talked about reducing the number of times teachers are out of the classroom, and so they don't have to plan and do all that work, and they're with kids because of professional development. If we could do something with a release day model where we did it every month or almost every month, as opposed to a couple of release days, a full day, and then having professional job embedded days during the school day, which are problematic for teachers and for kids. So we put together a draft. We looked at certain days that we felt were important or made sense to do the release days, often before a long weekend. We know that's always very popular in the community. So one of the things that we're talking about now, in order for this to work, if we were to keep it on Fridays, like we have almost every release day that we have is on a Friday, if we were to keep it that way, then kids that would have activities or classes on Friday afternoon would miss that once a month, which doesn't seem very beneficial for our students. So we talked about, as a leadership team, going to a 5-day schedule, essentially day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, as an entire district. Starting that on the first day of school, which is on the 29th of August. So that would be a day 1, the 30th would be a day 2, Friday would be a day 3, and then when they came back from Labor Day, that would be day 4, day 5, and then the 6th would be a day 1. So that's what we're kind of playing around with that right now as a district and looking at it from a leadership perspective, leadership team perspective. There's a couple of things we have to do. We have to obviously communicate that out. We have to be on the same day as a district. So you couldn't have the high school on day 2 and the elementary school on day 3, because we want to make sure with part-time staff and shared staff, it works for us. So that's what we're looking at right now. We're going to work at this a little bit more and hopefully have some things completed for the next meeting. But I would welcome any feedback you have around that, and whether you think that's a good idea or bad idea. We should look at rotating the days we're trying to think of what makes sense for parents. If we're going to add additional half days for students, and you have working parents, would it make sense to have it on the same day so folks can plan on that?
I definitely think so.
So that was the thing that we were thinking about. But by the same token, we didn't want to have the kids suffer by missing specific coursework or classes if it's always on that specific day at a specific time. So that's what we're grappling with.
And this 1 through 5, this is not like something completely novel we're making up. These are things that other school districts do as well. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
So
many
it's
work
not-
go on a 6-day schedule. You know.
So,
I like keeping it on the same day for working parents. I like.
Well, just for not working, not
Oh, yes.
everybody,
Right.
especially, and consistency for the kids. They know it's a Friday. That's very important in the younger ages as well.
But yeah, it's going to be difficult though,
No doubt.
especially with the shared staff,
Mhm.
because that's a huge piece.
So that's the thing we're working on right now, is looking at that, working with the teachers on that to see how it would impact the shared staff. Because what we've done the last couple of years, for the most part, is we tried not to share staff with elementary and secondary. So before, we were sharing staff with elementary, secondary, and it was really problematic for scheduling. The teacher's day was problematic because they may start at the secondary in the morning and end up in elementary in the afternoon. Like, what does that look like for their day? So we've tried to get away from that right now. So we want to get some feedback from them on how that would impact their work.
I guess, I'm going to be a Grinch here. I have a concern about doing it on Fridays, Jeff. I work in a district where we did it on Tuesdays. My wife works in a district where they do it on Wednesdays. I feel like there's a tendency, if you're doing it on Fridays, and I've done this as a parent, if you got a half day, we're going to pull the kid out, we're going to go skiing earlier, we're going to do whatever earlier. And then I think as the teachers see that phenomenon, they start providing, those become not real days. I mean, already I have a concern, you and I have talked about, that, the last day before a long weekend, last day before vacation, teachers are coming to you with requests and you're by and large approving them to take them off. And I get it, like especially around Christmas time, if they're traveling, you could save thousands of dollars for a family if you leave a day early. And our teachers don't always have the opportunity to do that. At the same time, teachers have a lot of vacation time. They just have to take it when we tell them they can, as a committee. And I think what happens is, I send my kids to school. People send their kids to school in those days because they're important. We tell them they're important learning days.
Right.
But if a kid's got 3 substitute teachers that day, they say, what the heck am I doing here? And I think that if you have them on Fridays, I think you run the risk that those become, the mornings are not really teaching days anymore. And there's nothing we do about that, but if you have it on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, I think that phenomenon is less likely.
I think that's such a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think from what and we can look at that, absolutely.
I'm sure you were trying to adhere to district history and tradition, which I have always been a big proponent of, but maybe it's because my kid's in high school now, I don't know, and I'm not pulling her out. But I just, having seen what happened before a couple of vacation days this year already,
Well, can we collect
I'm
some
concerned
data on
about it.
that?
So
What it really looked like?
So we have data on days, like for instance, when we first instituted the release day on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving instead of a day off. So we have data on that. We also have data on the Friday before Christmas, or winter vacation. And we have that data too. So we can take a peek at that.
So those are very big travel days. But if you're inserting a half day on a Friday and it's March, or, I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe I conceptualize school differently, and I don't take my kids out, whether it's a half day or not.
I think if you're likely to do that, you're probably more likely to do it if it's a Friday as opposed to a Wednesday,
The
if
great
that's
sucking
your...
sound that is Loon Mountain
Right.
throughout February.
So that was the conversation that we had on that, was that if it's more likely to happen on a Friday or the Tuesday after a long weekend, if you had a day off or a half day that day, people may not come back.
Right.
So we did talk a little bit about that if someone is traveling, they're going to look at it as a release day and then say, well, we'll come back on Wednesday instead.
Yeah.
So we did have conversations around that. We can look at it again. There's nothing set in stone. That's why I brought it back to you guys to get some feedback on this, because I think it's, it's important for our teachers to have that time and not be away from kids, which, the feedback to me has been that it's problematic. Not to mention that we actually have lots of subs around, which is problematic, and that's something that my colleagues and I are dealing with nationwide. It's a problem.
And I'm not opposed.
And people aren't subbing.
I'm not opposed to a one-year trial of doing it on Fridays. As I think about what other districts do, I think it tends to be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so you don't send this message that one Friday a month just kind of doesn't count.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't want to delve into it, but just a point of clarification. Aren't teachers forbidden, so to speak, not to take a holiday before a vacation? Well, that's the way it is in Needham, for example.
Their contract does not allow them to do that.
Okay.
However, in the last contract, we put language in there that said at the superintendent's discretion they can do that. So I do get requests all the time.
And I trust your discretion. I
haven't denied one yet, so.
Well, I worry that it's...
it's not like there's...
Right, subject to abuse.
Yeah, people come to me, they talk to me about what their situation is, and oftentimes it's a once-in-a-lifetime event, or it's a family event, or they're visiting a child overseas that's doing a semester abroad. I mean, it's all those kinds of things. It's not like, I want to get down to Cape early. That's not what it is. It's really legit reasons why folks would need a day like that to go. So it makes sense to me. But it happens, no doubt.
I think it's worth looking at, even a Wednesday or...
Sure, we could do that. I mean, how about this? Does it make sense at least to have the same day if we're going to go to a 5-day rotation?
Yes.
Because that helps families?
Yes. So if it's always Wednesday or, yes.
Right.
I mean, I think folks also have to realize, and I know you realize this because we've looked at other schedules, is that there are school districts right around us that do this every week.
Every week, yeah.
Every week.
It is, and I agree, it is different doing it just once a month. That's why I said I'd conceptually be willing to try it for a year.
Yeah.
Especially as we're getting towards the point where we really should be approving a calendar. I'd be willing to wait one more meeting, but So I would be willing to try for a year. I do know. I mean, Wayland, Newton, a lot of districts do. Dover-Sherburne do one, one release day a week. And I get why they do it, and it's valuable to them. I'm not sure we're at that point yet. But.
I do think you make a valid point with the subs and trying to get subs, if it's a release day on a Friday all the time like that, we could run into some issues that we don't want to really run into, so.
Yeah, I don't anticipate any abuse by the staff.
No.
I don't anticipate that. I think they take their professional development very seriously. I don't anticipate that. I hear your concern around kids being there on that half day. Yeah.
Maybe it wouldn't be that important within the middle school or high school because missing one day is tough. But yeah, I can see in the early day.
Right.
Okay. So I'll come back with leadership next week and look at some of these dates and maybe pick a different time. But the concept of the 5-day and the concept of the same day makes sense to you.
Yes. And we'll approve donations.
You want to skip over the student activity, or do you want to?
Oh, sorry. The student activity policy.
I actually didn't bring it with me tonight because I had the budget that I was studying, but I reviewed it. I know there have been some changes made. Some of them I requested. I move that we approve the student activity policy as most recently amended, and I think that's the version that's been posted. So.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
I move to table donations.
Sure.
And do you want to give a superintendent's report to the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had just one item on that, the Director of Student Services update. So the committee met last week and chose, there were 18 applicants, there were 8 resumes given to them that we whittled down. They chose 3 candidates to interview this week, so the interview starts tomorrow. Nat Vaughn is chairing that committee. He's coordinating all that. So they have the 3 candidates in. I think it's 4, 5:15, I think 6 or 6:30, or I think it's 6:30 tomorrow evening. And again, that group, I put it out on my blog. It's parents, teachers, administrators, et cetera. And they develop questions, great questions, and their charge now is to forward the 2 best, or even all 3 if they feel comfortable, to the school committee and to me for the second round of interviews, and then we'll make a decision based on that. But I think from what Nat has told me, really good qualified candidates. Parents have given me the same feedback, so we'll see where it goes.
And Jeff,
optimistic.
When they come to the school committee for an interview, is there a procedure by which we can keep that confidential to help them with their current district, or is that?
So last year we did the process, we looked at doing just 2 members of the school committee. And
subcommittee, okay.
So a subcommittee, not an official subcommittee, but just 2 members and me, and we're doing that. But that appointment piece needs to happen in front of the full board.
Sure, but by that point, hopefully you've gotten.
Make a recommendation. Yes, the school committee members and I would make a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I have a fear of losing good candidates again, because if you have more than one come before the school committee, I mean, if you get to that point and there's only one, I'm happy to interview them publicly. But if you have more than one come before the committee, I think you're putting all of them in jeopardy in their current jobs, and you're sending a message to their current positions. I think that's where you end up losing.
So I would say that whoever the person is that will be, or 2 people that would be brought to you, if at that point, it's not going to be it'll be a public meeting, because it should be a public interview, because you folks will have the opportunity to ask them questions prior to the appointment.
Right.
So it's still going to, they can't get away from that.
Well, they're not, I mean, right, that's right. It's not, nothing is set in stone until we vote for them. I want to get as much input from the committee that's in place, and then, some subset of this committee as we can before we put candidates in a position where they may withdraw because they're in peril in their district. Yeah.
Right, okay. That makes sense. So that's where we are, and the goal still is to get someone or 2 people up to school committee level by February vacation. So I'll get some feedback from Nat after tomorrow night and get a sense of what the committee is thinking. My assumption is they'll make a decision on at least 2 people tomorrow night and then move forward from there.
Excellent. Next item is district recognition.
I gotta table that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Do we have anything, James?
James, you are a trooper.
I'll be brief.
God bless you, man.
So, in recent news, yesterday, Student Council attended the Special Olympics bocce tournament at Rockland High School. Student Council brought roughly 20 fans, along with 3 of Medfield's own participating athletes. That was a really fun day for both the athletes and the fans. Rockland did a really nice
Great
job.
pictures on Twitter, by the way. Those are great.
Yeah.
You wanna-
A lot of fun. Looking into the future, I'll start the plug now. We lost the audience, but if anyone's still watching on TV, yeah. And to you. For the first time in 3 years, Medfield's going to be bringing back the Putting for Patients fundraiser. It's back to the high school, which is the mini golf fundraiser. It's going to be on March 18th, so an early save the date for anyone.
Is that Sunday, James?
That is.
After the fashion show,
Is the fashion show the 16th?
the 17th.
17th.
Good chew, dropping some knowledge.
I know. Nice way to weave that in.
I've said too much already. Moving on.
I have,
This Friday, the high school is hosting this gap year fair for students and parents, and I'm really psyched that that is being promoted because I think it's great to have more options for students.
And I have nothing, just thank you to all the people that came out and were so dedicated to spend so much time listening to all the questions, very respectful and thoughtful, so I appreciate that. For future agenda items, we will have the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey, the high school handbook revisions, and the new grant procedure handbook, and anything that we've tabled for this evening. With that, I will entertain. Our next meeting is Monday, February 12th, and is there a motion to adjourn?
Before we do, is the Metro West Health Survey definitely on for that date?
It is.
Okay.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV, Community Shows.